The phone rang at exactly 7:30 on that Tuesday evening, and I almost didn't answer. I was exhausted from a long day of client presentations, my feet ached from wearing heels since 6 in the morning, and all I wanted was to sink into my couch with a glass of wine. But when I saw Mom's name on the screen, I picked up expecting her usual cheerful questions about Christmas preparations. "Don't come for Christmas this year, Alexandra. We think it's best if you stay home." Her voice was calm, eerily calm, like she was discussing the weather or what to have for dinner. Before I could even process the words, before I could ask why or what I'd done wrong, my brother Marcus got on the line. "We'll pretend we don't know you if you show up. This is what's best for everyone." The line went dead, leaving me standing in my apartment phone, still pressed to my ear, wondering what I could have possibly done wrong. Sleep didn't come that night. I lay in bed replaying every recent interaction with my family, searching for clues about what had gone so terribly wrong. By morning, I'd called in sick to work something I hadn't done in 3 years. My hands shook as I dialed my cousin Sarah's number. She'd always been the one I could count on for honest answers. "Alexandra, I can't really talk right now," Sarah whispered when she answered. I could hear her moving, probably stepping outside her office. "Sarah, please. Mom just told me not to come for Christmas. Marcus said they'd pretend not to know me. What's happening?" The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Finally, she sighed. "There was a meeting last weekend at your mom's house. The whole family was there except you." "What kind of meeting? Why wasn't I invited?" "It was about you, Alex. Richard called everyone together. He said things needed to be discussed about your place in the family. Richard, my stepfather, the man who'd married my mother 3 years after my father's death, who'd moved into our family home like he'd always belonged there." My stomach churned. "Sarah, what did he say?" "He talked about how your promotion and your success were making other family members uncomfortable. He said you lorded it over everyone, that you thought you were better than us. He had examples, Alex. Things you'd said, ways you'd acted. By the end, everyone was convinced that some distance would be good for family harmony." "And you believed him?" My voice cracked. "I didn't want to. But he was so convincing, and your mom was nodding along, and Marcus backed him up. When it came time to vote, I voted with everyone else. I'm so sorry, Alex. He made it sound like you were tearing the family apart with your attitude." I sank onto my kitchen floor, back against the cabinets. "Sarah, you know me. Have I ever acted superior? Have I ever made anyone feel less than—" "No, that's what's been eating at me. After the meeting, I started thinking about all the examples Richard gave, and they were all twisted. Like when you offered to help pay for Jamie's dental work, he made it sound like you were flaunting your money, not trying to help your nephew." He twisted my offer to help my nephew. My voice rose with disbelief. Sarah's voice dropped even lower. "Alex, there's something else. After everyone left, I forgot my purse and went back. I overheard Richard on the phone in his study. He was talking about how the plan was working perfectly, how soon you'd be completely isolated from the family. He mentioned something about your father's estate and making sure you couldn't cause problems." The room spun. "My father's estate? What problems?" "I don't know, but Alex, I think Richard has been planning this for a long time. He's been collecting grievances against you, real or imagined, and presenting them to different family members. He's been building a case, and we all fell for it. Even me. God, I'm such an idiot." "When exactly was this meeting?" Saturday afternoon. He made it seem spontaneous, like he was just so concerned about family dynamics that he had to address it immediately. Your mom served coffee and her homemade coffee cake like it was just another family gathering. But thinking back, everything was too organized, too prepared. He had talking points, Alex. He had a whole presentation about the importance of family harmony. I forced myself to breathe slowly. Who else was there? Everyone. Your mom, Marcus, Aunt Marie, Uncle Paul, your cousins James and Melissa, even Grandma Dorothy. The only ones missing were you and Aunt Janet in Seattle. And they all voted to exclude me from Christmas. Richard made it seem temporary, like maybe after some time apart things could heal, but the way he smiled when the vote was unanimous, Alex, it didn't look like concern. It looked like victory. I need to understand this, Sarah. I need to know what's really happening. Be careful. Richard's not who he pretends to be. I've been noticing things since the meeting, things I ignored before. The way he controls your mom, how he's always asking about family finances, how he gets this look when your father is mentioned. Something's very wrong here. After we hung up, I sat on my kitchen floor for a long time. The December sun streamed through my windows, but I felt cold. My family, the people I'd grown up with, who I'd shared every holiday with for 32 years, had sat around my mother's dining room table and voted me out of their lives. And they'd done it while eating coffee cake, as if excommunicating me was just another item on a weekend agenda. But Sarah's revelation about Richard's phone call changed everything. This wasn't about family harmony or my supposed attitude. This was about my father's estate, though I couldn't understand why. The estate had been settled 5 years ago. What could Richard possibly be worried about? I pulled myself up and walked to my home office where I kept all my important documents. In the back of my filing cabinet was a folder labeled Dad. I hadn't opened it in years. Inside were copies of his will, the estate settlement papers, and a small brass key I'd never known what to do with. My father's attorney had given it to me after the funeral, saying only that my father wanted me to have it and I'd understand when the time was right. I held the key up to the light. It was small, like a safety deposit box key. Had my father left me something else? Something Richard knew about, but I didn't. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Don't try to contact Mom. She's made her decision. We all have. I stared at the message from my younger brother, the one I'd helped with homework throughout high school, who I'd driven to college when Mom was too emotional to do it. His words were cold final, but something felt rehearsed about them, like he was reading from a script. Another text, this one from my mother. This is for the best Alexandra. Please respect our wishes. Respect their wishes to abandon me. Respect their wishes to exclude me from the family I'd been part of my whole life. The irony wasn't lost on me. All my life, I'd been taught that family came first, that we stood by each other no matter what. Apparently, that only applied when Richard approved. I looked again at the brass key in my hand. Whatever my father had left for me, whatever Richard was so afraid of, I was going to find it. If my family could so easily cast me aside based on twisted stories and manipulated evidence, then maybe it was time I learned what was really happening in the house I'd grown up in. The December cold had nothing on the chill in my heart, but for the first time since that phone call, I felt something other than hurt. I felt determined. Richard might have turned my family against me, but he'd made one mistake. He'd given me a mystery to solve, and I'd always been the persistent one in the family, the one who didn't give up. He should have remembered that. As I sat at my desk that night, the brass key beside my laptop, I forced myself to think back to Thanksgiving just 3 weeks earlier. How had I missed what was happening? The signs must have been there, but I'd been too caught up in the joy of being with family to notice. Thanksgiving had started normally enough. I'd arrived at Mom's house early to help with cooking, bringing my traditional contribution of homemade cranberry sauce and sweet potato casserole. The house smelled like turkey and sage, just as it had every Thanksgiving since childhood. But now, thinking back with clear eyes, the strangeness had started immediately. Mom had hugged me at the door, but it was brief, almost obligatory. "Oh, you're early," she'd said, as if my helping with preparations wasn't a 20-year tradition. "Of course I'm early." I'd laughed, not catching the discomfort in her eyes. "When have I ever not helped with Thanksgiving dinner?" She'd turned away quickly. "Richard's handling most of it this year. He has very specific ideas about how things should be done." That should have been my first clue. Mom had always been the Thanksgiving general, orchestrating the meal with military precision, but I'd simply assumed she was enjoying having help from her husband. In the kitchen, Richard had indeed taken charge. He was basting the turkey when I entered, wearing Mom's apron, the one Dad had given her that said, "Kitchen Queen" in faded letters. "Alexandra," he'd acknowledged me with a nod. "Everything's under control here." "I can help." I'd offered, reaching for the familiar drawer where we kept the good silver. "No need. Marcus is handling table settings. Why don't you just relax in the living room?" I'd been gently but firmly ejected from the kitchen I'd cooked in since I was tall enough to reach the counter. At the time, I'd thought Richard was trying to be helpful to give me a break. Now I realized he was establishing territory, showing me I was a guest in what had been my home. Though dinner itself was where things had gotten truly strange. I'd been seated at the far end of the table away from Mom in what had always been Cousin Jamie's spot. When I'd questioned it, Richard had explained about trying new arrangements to include everyone better. But the new arrangement had me isolated with Richard's brother Ted on one side and an empty chair on the other. Throughout dinner, every time I'd tried to contribute to conversation, something had interrupted. When I'd started telling Aunt Marie about a funny incident at work, Richard had suddenly needed everyone's attention to carve the turkey. When I'd tried to share news about my promotion with Grandma Dorothy, Marcus had chosen that moment to announce he was thinking of changing jobs, monopolizing the conversation for 20 minutes. The most telling moment came when Uncle Paul asked about my work. I'd just landed a major client, something I was genuinely proud of, and I'd started explaining the project. "It's exciting," I'd said. "We're redesigning their entire marketing strategy, and if it goes well, it could mean partnerships with their sister companies." Richard had set down his fork deliberately. "Must be nice to have such important work," he'd said, his tone suggesting it was anything but nice. Some of us remember when family was more important than climbing corporate ladders. The table had gone quiet. I'd been stunned by the unexpected attack. "I've never put work before family, Richard." "Haven't you? When was the last time you made it to Sunday dinner or helped your mother with her garden?" Success has a way of changing people's priorities. "That's not fair," I'd started, but Mom had interrupted. "Let's not argue at Thanksgiving," she'd said quietly, but she'd been looking at me, not Richard, as if I was the one causing conflict. The rest of dinner had continued in that vein. Every achievement I mentioned was met with Richard's subtle digs about ego and forgetting roots. Every attempt at normal conversation was twisted into evidence of my supposed superiority complex. By the time dessert was served, I'd gone nearly silent, confused and hurt by the hostility I couldn't understand. Marcus had been strange too. My brother, who usually couldn't wait to show me whatever new gadget he'd bought or game he was playing, had barely made eye contact. When I'd asked about his girlfriend Emma, he'd mumbled something about her being busy and changed the subject. The only person who'd seemed concerned was Aunt Marie. As everyone moved to the living room for coffee, she'd pulled me aside in the hallway. "Are you all right, dear?" she'd asked, studying my face with worried eyes. "I'm fine," I'd lied. "Just tired from work." She'd glanced around, then leaned closer. "Alexandra, be careful. Sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who—" "Mabisai," Richard's voice had boomed from the living room. "We need you to settle a debate about the game." Aunt Marie had squeezed my hand quickly before hurrying away, but there had been something urgent in her touch, something that felt like a warning. Later, as I'd gathered my empty dishes to leave, I'd found myself alone in the kitchen with Mom for just a moment. She was wrapping leftovers with mechanical precision, not looking at me. "Mom, is everything okay? You've seemed distant today." Her hands had stilled. For a second, I thought she might tell me something important. Then Richard had appeared in the doorway. "Helen, we need to discuss tomorrow's plans," he'd said, his eyes never leaving me. "I should go," I'd said, quickly recognizing dismissal. As I'd put on my coat, I'd reached into my purse for my car keys and felt something unfamiliar. A folded piece of paper that hadn't been there before. But Richard had been watching from the doorway, so I'd left it alone, planning to look later. Now, sitting at my desk 3 weeks later, I remembered that paper. I grabbed my purse, the same one I'd carried that day, and dug through the inner pocket. There it was, folded small and tight. My hands trembled as I opened it. Aunt Marie's careful handwriting filled the small page. Alexandra, dear, I'm worried about you. Richard has been asking strange questions about your father's affairs and your inheritance. He seems particularly interested in whether your father left you anything besides what was in the will. Last week, I overheard him on the phone saying something about making sure she never finds it. I don't know what it is, but please be careful. He's not the man your mother thinks he is. Watch your back. Aunt Marie. I read the note 3 times, my heart pounding harder with each pass. Aunt Marie had tried to warn me at Thanksgiving, and I'd been too oblivious to see it. She'd risked Richard's anger to slip me this note, and I'd carried it around for 3 weeks without knowing. Everything about that Thanksgiving looked different now. Richard hadn't been establishing new traditions or trying to include everyone better. He'd been systematically isolating me, testing how the family would react to treating me as an outsider, and they'd followed his lead whether from manipulation or misplaced loyalty. The placement at the end of the table, the constant interruptions, the digs about my success, it had all been choreographed. Richard had been laying groundwork, planting seeds of resentment and distance that would flower into that family meeting where they'd voted to exclude me entirely. But why? What was he so afraid I'd find? I picked up the brass key again, turning it over in my fingers. My father had been a careful man, a planner. He'd built his construction business from nothing into a successful company, and he'd documented everything meticulously. If he'd left me this key, he'd had a reason. More memories from Thanksgiving surfaced. Richard's brother Ted, who'd been seated next to me, had made odd comments throughout dinner. Must be tough being the golden child, he'd said at one point, all that pressure to be perfect. I'd laughed it off. I'm far from perfect, Ted. That's not what Richard says. He says you always thought you were better than everyone, even as a kid. I hadn't known how to respond to that. Richard had known me for only 5 years since he'd married Mom. How could he speak about my childhood as if he'd been there? Now I understood. Richard had been building a narrative, feeding his version of me to anyone who would listen. The successful daughter who'd grown too big for her britches, who looked down on her working-class family, who needed to be brought down a peg. He'd even recruited his own brother to reinforce the message. The truly painful realization was how easily my family had believed it. One man's whispered poison had been enough to make them doubt 32 years of shared history. Every birthday party, every Christmas morning, every scraped knee Mom had bandaged, every soccer game Dad had cheered, and all of it had been erased by Richard's careful campaign. I looked at my phone, wanting desperately to call someone to hear a friendly voice. But who could I call? According to Sarah, the entire family had voted against me. Even Grandma Dorothy, who'd helped raise me after school while my parents worked. Even Uncle Paul, who'd taught me to ride a bike. They'd all chosen Richard's version of me over the truth. The brass key seemed to grow warm in my hand. Whatever was waiting for me in that safety deposit box, it was important enough that Richard had orchestrated an entire family coup to keep me from it. He'd stolen my family from me as surely as if he'd locked them away. But he'd made one crucial error. In trying so hard to keep me from something, he'd revealed that there was something to find. And now, with nothing left to lose, I was gonna find it. The note from Aunt Marie crackled as I smoothed it out again. She'd been brave enough to warn me when no one else would. I owed it to her, to my father, and to myself to uncover whatever truth Richard was so desperate to hide. Tomorrow I'd go to the bank. Tonight I'd mourn the family I'd lost to a con man's lies. But I wouldn't let grief stop me. If Richard thought excluding me from Christmas was enough to make me disappear, he'd severely underestimated Alexandra Patterson's daughter. My father had raised me to be strong, to ask questions, to never back down from bullies. Time to make him proud. The next morning arrived, gray and bitter cold, matching my mood perfectly. I'd barely slept, my mind churning through every interaction with Richard over the past 5 years, looking for signs I'd missed. By the time I finally gave up on sleep at 5:30, I'd compiled a mental list of dozens of moments that seemed suspicious in retrospect. I waited until exactly 9 o'clock to call Grandma Dorothy. She'd always been an early riser, and I knew she'd be finishing her breakfast tea. My hands shook as I dialed her number, hoping against hope that maybe she'd been misled too, that once she heard my side, she'd understand. Hello? Her voice was cautious, and I realized she'd seen my name on caller ID. Grandma, it's Alexandra. Please don't hang up. I need to understand what's happening. Silence stretched between us. I could hear her breathing, could picture her sitting at her kitchen table with her crossword puzzle and reading glasses. I don't think we should be talking, dear, she finally said, but her voice wavered. Grandma, you've known me my whole life. You taught me to tie my shoes and braid my hair. You made me soup when I was sick and helped me with my homework. How can you believe I'd suddenly become some horrible person who thinks she's better than everyone? Richard showed us the evidence, she said weakly. The things you said, the way you've been acting. What things? What evidence? Grandma, I haven't done anything except work hard and try to help when family members needed it. Since when is that a crime? I heard a shaky sigh. I don't know what to believe anymore. Richard was very convincing. He had examples, dates, things you'd said. Your mother was so upset. Was she upset? Or was Richard telling her to be upset, Grandma think? When have you ever seen me act superior or cruel to anyone in this family? I haven't. But Richard said you were clever about it, that you hid it well. He said people like you always do. People like me? What does that even mean? There was a longer pause. When Grandma Dorothy spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. He meant people who resent their families for being ordinary. He said your father filling your head with big dreams was what started it all. My father. Again, it came back to my father. Grandma, what does Dad have to do with any of this? I shouldn't be telling you this. I could hear her getting up, probably checking that no one was listening. Richard found some papers in your mother's attic a few months ago. Something about a safety deposit box your father left you. He was very upset about it. My pulse quickened. What kind of papers? I don't know exactly, but Richard said your father had hidden assets from the family, that he'd given you something that should have gone to your mother. He said you knew about it all along and were waiting for the right time to claim it. Grandma, I have no idea what's in any safety deposit box. Dad gave me a key after he died, but no information about it. I've never even tried to find out what it opens. You have the key! Her voice sharpened with something that sounded like fear. Yes, but... Alexandra listened to me very carefully. Richard has been obsessed with finding that key. He's torn apart your old room, searched your mother's house from top to bottom. Whatever your father left you, Richard wants it badly. But why? What could be so important? Grandma Dorothy's voice dropped even lower. I wasn't supposed to hear this, but last month, Richard was on the phone with someone arguing. He kept saying that if you found what was in that box, he'd lose everything. He mentioned something about embezzlement and your father's business records. The pieces started clicking together in my mind. Richard had worked for a competing construction company before he retired early at 52, just a year before he met my mother. Early retirement at that age was unusual, especially for someone who claimed to love his work. Grandma, was Richard involved with Dad's business somehow? Not directly, but... She paused, clearly wrestling with whether to continue. Your father bid against Richard's company for several big contracts in the years before he got sick. Your father won every time. Richard's company went under about 6 months before your father was diagnosed with cancer. A chill ran down my spine, and then Richard conveniently met Mom at a grief support group 2 years after Dad died. Don't say it like that, Grandma Dorothy protested weakly. Your mother was lonely. Richard seemed so kind, so understanding. Did it ever occur to anyone that it was too convenient, that maybe Richard targeted Mom? Your Aunt Janet said something similar at the time, but we all thought she was being paranoid. Richard was so helpful, so devoted to your mother. He made her smile again. Aunt Janet. My mom's sister in Seattle, the one who hadn't been at the family meeting. I made a mental note to call her. Grandma, I need you to think very carefully. Has Richard ever done or said anything that seemed off to you? Anything that made you uncomfortable? The silence stretched so long I thought she might have hung up. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling. There was one thing. About a year ago, I was visiting your mother and I needed an aspirin. Richard told me to look in his bathroom cabinet. I found a bottle of medication with your father's name on it. When I asked Richard about it, he got very flustered and said it was an old bottle he'd been meaning to throw out. But Alexandra, the prescription date was from just a month before. My blood ran cold. Did you tell anyone? I mentioned it to your mother, but she said I must have misread the date. Richard had already thrown the bottle away by then, so I couldn't check. I felt silly for bringing it up. Grandma, what was the medication? I don't remember exactly, but it was something for his heart. Your father was taking it during his cancer treatment because the chemotherapy was affecting his heart rhythm. I gripped the phone tighter. My father had died of sudden heart failure during his cancer treatment. The doctors had said it was a rare but possible complication of the aggressive chemotherapy. We'd all accepted it as tragic bad luck. Grandma, do you think... Could Richard have... Don't say it, she interrupted sharply. Don't even think it. I won't believe that your mother married a murderer. I finished quietly. I heard her sharp intake of breath, then what sounded like crying. What have we done? Oh, Alexandra, what have we done to you? It's not your fault, Grandma. Richard is a master manipulator. He's been planning this for years, maybe even before he met Mom. The family meeting, she said suddenly. Richard insisted you couldn't be there. He said it would be too confrontational, that it was better to discuss concerns without you present so everyone could speak freely. But thinking about it now, he didn't want you there to defend yourself, did he? No, he didn't. He needed to control the narrative completely. Oh, sweetheart, we voted to exclude you from Christmas, from family. How could we have been so blind? Because he's good at what he does, Grandma. But now that we know, we can fight back. Will you help me? I don't know. If Richard finds out I talked to you, are you afraid of him? The question hung in the air. When she answered, her voice was small. Yes, I think we all are, even if we don't admit it. He has this way of making you feel like terrible things will happen if you cross him. Nothing explicit, just implications. Then we need to be careful. But Grandma, I'm going to find out what's in that safety deposit box. And when I do, I have a feeling Richard's hold over this family is going to crumble. Your mother... Grandma Dorothy said suddenly, she hasn't been the same since she married him. She used to be so independent, so strong. Now she barely makes a decision without checking with Richard first. I thought it was just the dynamic of their marriage. But what if he's been controlling her too? I finished, using fear and manipulation to keep her in line. Find that box, Alexandra. Find whatever your father left you, and be careful. If Richard is capable of what we're thinking, I'll be careful. And Grandma, thank you for talking to me, for believing me. I should never have doubted you. You're Bill Patterson's daughter. He raised you right, and we all knew it. Richard he got into our heads somehow. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment processing everything I'd learned. Richard hadn't just stumbled into our lives. He'd targeted us, probably because of whatever was in that safety deposit box. He'd married my mother to get close to it, and when he couldn't find it, he'd systematically turn my family against me to prevent me from finding it myself. The medication bottle with my father's name haunted me, a prescription filled a month before Grandma found it years after my father's death. Why would Richard have my father's heart medication unless... I couldn't finish the thought, but I knew I had to find that safety deposit box. Whatever was inside, my father had thought it important enough to hide, and Richard feared it enough to destroy my family over it. I looked at the brass key sitting on my coffee table. Such a small thing to cause so much destruction. But tomorrow, I'd find out what secrets it unlocked, and then Richard would learn that excluding me from Christmas was the biggest mistake he'd ever made. The doorbell rang at 8:45 that evening, just as I was preparing notes about everything I'd learned. Through the peephole, I saw Sarah standing in the hallway, her face puffy from crying. She was holding a manila envelope and shifting nervously from foot to foot. I opened the door cautiously. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" "I can't do this anymore," she burst out, pushing past me into the apartment. "I can't pretend everything's fine when I know what Richard is doing to you. To all of us." I closed the door and turned to face her. She looked terrible. Her usually perfect makeup was smeared, her hair disheveled. This wasn't the composed marketing executive I knew. "What happened?" I asked, guiding her to the couch. "After we talked yesterday, I couldn't stop thinking about everything. So I started paying attention, really watching Richard when he didn't know I was looking. And Alex, he's been building a case against you for months." She thrust the manila envelope at me. "I took these from his home office when I was at your mom's house today. He has a whole file on you." My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside were printed emails, screenshots of text messages, and what looked like surveillance photos. I spread them across my coffee table, my stomach turning with each new piece. "Oh, these emails. I never sent these," I said, looking at a particularly nasty message supposedly from me to my mother about how disappointed I was in the family's lack of ambition. "I know," Sarah said miserably. "Look at the email address closely." I examined it more carefully. It was almost my email, but not quite Alexandra Patterson, 12A Gmail, versus my actual Alexandra Patterson, 21A Gmail. He created a fake email account. Ew, and used it to send horrible messages to family members, making it look like they came from you. Most people don't look that closely at email addresses, especially from family. Your mom got several of these. So did Marcus and Uncle Paul. I picked up another paper. It was a transcript of a conversation supposedly between me and a coworker where I called my family dead weight and said I was embarrassed by their blue-collar background. This is completely fabricated. I would never say these things. But it sounds just believable enough, doesn't it? Mixed with just enough truth, you do have a coworker named Jennifer. You did go to that conference in September. He's been stalking your social media, your LinkedIn, everything, to make his lies convincing. The surveillance photos were even more disturbing. Pictures of me at lunch with colleagues at the gym entering my office building. Each one had notes in Richard's handwriting, too busy for family dinner, spending money on expensive gym instead of helping mother, designer clothes while family struggles. He's been following me. I couldn't hide the shock in my voice. Or having someone else do it. Alex, this is the work of months, maybe longer. He's documented your entire life and twisted it into evidence of you being this terrible person who abandoned her family for success. I sank back into the couch. But why Sarah? Why go to all this trouble? Sarah pulled out her phone. "That's the other thing I need to tell you. Remember, I mentioned Richard was blackmailing me about Tom's gambling debts." I nodded. Sarah's husband Tom had struggled with gambling addiction a few years back, but I thought he'd gotten help. "Well, it turns out Richard is the one who got Tom back into gambling." She showed me text messages on her phone. These are from Tom's phone. Messages from someone named Rick inviting him to friendly poker games, offering to stake him when he was short on cash, encouraging him to try just one more hand. My jaw dropped. Richard deliberately got Tom addicted again to have leverage over me, and it worked. When he told me at the family meeting that he knew about the $60,000 Tom owes to some very dangerous people, I was terrified. He said he could make it all go away if I supported him about you. "Oh, Sarah," I reached for her hand. "But it gets worse," she continued, tears streaming down her face. I started looking into whether he'd done this to others. Remember how Cousin James suddenly had that affair scandal last year? The woman he was supposedly seeing sent photos to his wife, but James swore he'd never met her. You think Richard set him up? I know he did. I found receipts in his files for payments to a woman named Candy Stevens, $5,000 total. Guess whose stage name that is the woman in the photos with James? I thought about quiet, devoted James, how his marriage had barely survived that scandal. He hired someone to seduce James. Or at least to fake evidence of an affair, and Uncle Paul's tax problems that started 2 years ago. Richard's the one who reported him to the IRS. I found a copy of the anonymous tip in his files. The full scope of Richard's manipulation was staggering. He's been systematically creating leverage over everyone in the family. Everyone except you, Sarah said. You were too clean, too careful. No addictions to exploit, no affairs, no financial problems he could exacerbate. So he had to invent your sins instead. I stood up and started pacing. This all has to connect to whatever's in my father's safety deposit box. He wouldn't go to these lengths just to be controlling. That's what I thought too. Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out another document. So I did something maybe stupid. I searched his computer when he was out with your mom today. I found this. It was a printed news article from 8 years ago about the collapse of Stronghold Construction, the company Richard had worked for. The article mentioned allegations of embezzlement and bid rigging, though no charges were ever filed due to lack of evidence. Look at the date, Sarah pointed, 6 months before your father's cancer diagnosis. I studied the article more carefully. It says here that Stronghold lost several major contracts to Patterson Construction, my dad's company, in the months before the collapse. The owner claimed the bids were rigged, that someone was leaking their proposals to competitors. Now look at this. Sarah showed me another document, this one a bank statement. I found this in Richard's files too. It's from an account in the Cayman Islands. Look at the deposits. The deposits match the dates of the lost contracts exactly. 50,000 here, 75,000 there. All told, nearly $500,000 had flowed into that account over 6 months. He was selling his company's bid information to competitors. I breathed. That's why Stronghold went under. Richard destroyed his own company for money. But that's not the worst part, Sarah said quietly. Look at the withdrawal history. I scanned the withdrawals. They'd started 5 years ago, right after my father's death. Regular transfers of 20,000, 30,000. The account was nearly empty now. He's been draining it since Dad died, but why wait until then unless your father had evidence of what he'd done, Sarah finished. Evidence that Richard couldn't risk surfacing while your father was alive to use it. The implications made me dizzy. You're saying Richard might have killed my father to keep him quiet. I'm saying the timing is awfully convenient. Your father dies suddenly. Richard waits a respectable 2 years, then swoops in on your grieving mother, gets access to the house searches for whatever evidence your father had hidden, but can't find it. Because Dad left it in a safety deposit box and gave me the key, I said slowly. Richard must have discovered that somehow, maybe from the papers Grandma mentioned he found in the attic. Sarah nodded. And when he couldn't find the key or the box, he decided to neutralize you instead. Make sure that even if you found it, no one would believe you over him. By turning my entire family against me. The cruelty of it took my breath away. He destroyed my relationships with everyone I love just to protect himself. No, not everyone, Sarah said firmly. I'm here, and I think others will come around once they know the truth. Aunt Marie already suspects something. She's been asking careful questions. And your Grandma Dorothy called me after you talked. She's frightened, but she wants to help. What about my mother? Do you think she knows? Sarah's face fell. I honestly don't know. Sometimes I see flashes of fear in her eyes when Richard speaks. Other times she seems completely under his spell. He's very careful around her, always playing the devoted husband, while systematically destroying her daughter. Anger was replacing the hurt now burning hot in my chest. He's taken everything from me, Sarah. My family, my reputation, my mother. Then we take it back, Sarah said fiercely. You find whatever's in that box and we expose him for what he is. I've already made copies of everything I found. If anything happens to either of us, I've instructed my lawyer to send it all to the FBI. You think he's dangerous enough to... I couldn't finish the sentence. A man who possibly killed your father and definitely destroyed multiple lives to protect his secrets. Yes, I think he's dangerous, but he's also arrogant. He thinks he's won, that excluding you from Christmas means you'll slink away in defeat. I thought about Richard's satisfied smile at Thanksgiving, the way he'd so carefully orchestrated my isolation. He'd been so sure of himself, so confident in his control over my family. He's about to learn differently, I said. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to find that safety deposit box, and then Richard's carefully constructed world is going to come crashing down. Sarah squeezed my hand. I'll help however I can. And Alex? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I let him manipulate me, that I voted against you. You've been nothing but kind to our family, and I let fear make me betray you. He's a master manipulator, Sarah. He found everyone's weakness and exploited it. The fact that you're here now risking his wrath to help me, that's what matters. After Sarah left, promising to keep monitoring Richard and stay in touch, I sat surrounded by the evidence of Richard's campaign against me. The fake emails, the twisted narratives, the surveillance photos, it was all so calculated, so thorough. He'd spent months, maybe years, preparing to destroy me if necessary. But he'd made one mistake. He'd underestimated the bonds of family, thinking fear could permanently override love. Sarah was proof that his control was already cracking. Grandma Dorothy was questioning. Aunt Marie was suspicious. I picked up the brass key one more time. Tomorrow, I'd find out what my father had thought important enough to hide. Whatever was in that box had cost me my family, at least temporarily, but it might also be the key to getting them back and getting justice for my father. Richard thought he'd won by excluding me from Christmas. Instead, he'd freed me to fight back without worrying about keeping the peace or protecting family harmony. He'd created his own worst enemy, someone with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. First National Bank stood like a fortress of brick and glass in downtown, its revolving doors reflecting the weak December morning sun. I'd been waiting outside since 8:30, the brass key burning like a coal in my pocket. I'd barely slept, my mind racing with possibilities about what my father might have hidden away. At exactly 9 o'clock, I pushed through the doors and approached the customer service desk. The woman behind it, whose nameplate read Brenda, smiled warmly. "How can I help you today?" "I need to access a safety deposit box," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The problem is, I'm not sure which one. My father passed away 5 years ago and left me this key but no other information." Brenda's expression softened with sympathy. "I'm sorry for your loss. Let me see what I can do. May I see the key?" I handed it over, watching as she examined it carefully. "This is definitely one of our keys. The number's been worn off, but the serial code is still partially visible. What was your father's name?" "William Patterson. He would have opened the box sometime before January of 2019. "Let me check our records." Her fingers flew over the keyboard. After a few moments, she frowned. "That's odd. I show a William Patterson had a box here, but it's marked as closed." My heart sank. "Closed when..." "Just a moment." She typed more commands. "This is very strange. The box was supposedly closed 2 years ago, but there's no signature card for the closure, and the annual fee has been automatically paid from an account that's still active. So the box might still be open. Let me call my manager. This is highly irregular." 20 minutes later, I was sitting in a small office with Brenda and her manager, a stern-looking man named Mr. Carlyle. He'd spent 10 minutes on the phone with someone from their records department, his frown deepening with each passing moment. "Ms. Patterson," he said, finally setting down the phone, "it appears someone attempted to close your father's box without proper authorization. They had a death certificate and claimed to be the executor, but the signature on the closure form doesn't match our records. Who tried to close it? He consulted his papers, a Richard Winters. He presented himself as your father's business partner. Richard, of course. He's my stepfather now, but he was never my father's partner. They were competitors. Mr. Carlyle's expression hardened. Then, we may have attempted fraud on our hands. The good news is our staff at the time noticed the signature discrepancy and refused to close the box. It's been sitting untouched ever since. The attempted closure was marked in our system, which is why it showed as closed initially. So I can access it. We'll need to verify your identity and your right to access. Do you have your father's death certificate and proof you're his daughter? I'd come prepared. I handed over my birth certificate, my father's death certificate, and a copy of his will that named me as partial beneficiary. Mr. Carlyle examined everything carefully. This all appears to be in order. However, there's one more issue. The box rental is technically in arrears because of the confusion over the attempted closure. You'll need to pay the back fees before we can grant access. Oh, how much? 2 years at $150 per year, $300 total. I paid gladly, my hands shaking as I wrote the check. Finally, Mr. Carlyle stood. Follow me, please. The vault was exactly as I'd imagined it, walls of brushed steel boxes each with 2 keyholes. Mr. Carlyle led me to box number 412. Your key goes in the left lock, mine in the right, he explained. We turned them together. The locks clicked open with a sound that seemed to echo through my bones. Mr. Carlyle slid out a long metal box and handed it to me. You can use one of our private rooms. Take as much time as you need. The private room was small and windowless, containing just a table and chair. I set the box down and stared at it for a long moment, almost afraid to open it. Whatever was inside had cost me so much already, but it might also hold the key to getting it all back. I lifted the lid. The first thing I saw was an envelope with my name on it in my father's handwriting. Beneath it were folders, documents, and what looked like USB drives. I picked up the envelope with trembling fingers and opened it. My dearest Alexandra, if you're reading this, then I'm gone and you finally found what I've hidden. I'm sorry for the secrecy, but I couldn't risk this information falling into the wrong hands while I was alive to be silenced. By now, Richard Winters has probably inserted himself into our family. He's been circling like a vulture for years, and I fear my illness will give him the opportunity he's been waiting for. He's a dangerous man, sweetheart, more dangerous than you know. The documents in this box prove that Richard Winters embezzled over $600,000 from Stronghold Construction by selling bid information to competitors, myself included. I didn't know the information was stolen when I bought it. I thought I was dealing with a legitimate consultant. When I discovered the truth, I confronted my source, who revealed everything about Richard's scheme. I should have gone to the authorities immediately, but I was already sick, and Richard made it clear that if I exposed him, he'd make sure you and your mother suffered. He has connections to people who hurt others for money. I couldn't risk your safety. But I also couldn't let him get away with it. So I've gathered everything, bank records, emails, recorded conversations, and testimonies from others. He's wronged. It's all here. There's enough evidence to put him in federal prison for a very long time. I've also included something else. During my investigation, I discovered Richard was involved in 3 other deaths that were ruled accidents or natural causes. The details are in the blue folder. I believe he killed these people to cover his tracks, and I fear I may be next. If something happens to me suddenly, even if it looks natural, given my cancer, please take this to the FBI. Don't go to local police. Richard has connections there. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you better, my darling girl, but I knew if anyone could stand up to him after I'm gone, it would be you. You have your mother's heart and my stubbornness. Use them both. All my love, Dad. P.S. The USB drives contain recordings of Richard threatening me. Make copies before you do anything else. Trust no one except federal authorities. Tears streamed down my face as I set the letter aside. My father had known. He'd known Richard was dangerous, had maybe even suspected Richard would hasten his death, and he'd spent his final months gathering evidence to protect us from beyond the grave. I opened the first folder with shaking hands. It contained bank statements from multiple accounts showing large deposits that corresponded with dates when Stronghold Construction lost major bids. There were emails between Richard and various competitors negotiating prices for information. One email thread was particularly damning, Richard explicitly offering to provide Patterson Construction's bid numbers for the Riverside Hospital project in exchange for $50,000. The blue folder my father had mentioned was even more disturbing. It contained newspaper clippings about 3 deaths, a Stronghold accountant who died in a car accident after raising concerns about missing funds, a competitor who drowned in his pool after threatening to expose the bid rigging scheme, and a private investigator who'd suffered a fatal fall while looking into Richard's activities. Each death had been ruled accidental, but my father had compiled evidence suggesting otherwise. The accountant's brake lines had been suspiciously worn. The competitor had been an excellent swimmer with no history of drinking. The private investigator had been afraid of heights and would never have gone near that cliff voluntarily. The USB drives were labeled with dates. I desperately wanted to listen to them immediately, but knew I needed to be careful. Instead, I photographed every document with my phone, then used the bank scanner to create digital copies that I emailed to myself and to a new encrypted cloud account I created on the spot. The final folder contained the most personal betrayal. It was full of medical records, my father's medical records, but there were discrepancies. Prescriptions filled that my father's regular doctor hadn't ordered. Medications that could have dangerous interactions with his chemotherapy drugs. Notes from appointments with doctors my father had never mentioned. One document made my blood freeze. It was a prescription for digoxin, a heart medication filled under my father's name, but signed by a doctor who, according to a quick Google search on my phone, had lost his license 2 years before my father's death. The same medication Grandma Dorothy had found in Richard's bathroom. My father hadn't died from complications of chemotherapy. He'd been murdered slowly and carefully by someone who knew exactly how to make it look natural. I sat back, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what I'd discovered. Richard wasn't just a con man or a thief. He was a serial killer who'd murdered at least 4 people, including my father, to protect his secrets. And now he was married to my mother, living in our house, controlling our family. The urge to call the police immediately was overwhelming, but my father's warning echoed in my head. Local police might be compromised. I needed to contact the FBI directly. I carefully returned everything to the box, then called Mr. Carlyle back. I need to keep this box active, I told him, and I need to add some security measures. Is it possible to flag this box so that only I can access it no matter what documentation someone else might provide? Given the attempted fraud we've already seen, I think that's wise, he agreed. We can put a special restriction on it. We'll also need a new signature card and perhaps a password. Can you also document that I was here today and what I found in case something happens to me? His eyebrows rose, but he nodded. We can create a sealed record of your visit. An hour later, I left the bank with copies of everything stored in multiple locations and the originals safely locked away. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Richard just left the house in a hurry, looked angry. Be careful. He knew. Somehow, Richard knew I'd found the safety deposit box. Maybe the bank had protocols that had alerted him to the access, or maybe he had someone watching me. Either way, my time to act safely was running out. I flagged down a taxi, not trusting my own car. Federal building, please, I told the driver, and please hurry. As the city flashed by outside the window, I clutched my bag containing the photographed evidence. My father had given me the tools to destroy Richard, but more importantly, he'd given me the truth. Richard had taken so much from our family, my father's life, my mother's freedom, my family's trust in me. But his reign of terror was about to end. "I got it, Dad," I whispered to the winter sky. "I got it all." The FBI field office was a maze of security checkpoints and stern-faced agents. I'd spent 2 hours that morning giving my statement to Agent Jennifer Chen, a composed woman who'd listened to my story without interrupting, her expression growing more serious with each revelation. She'd made copies of all my evidence and promised to investigate immediately, but warned me it could take time. "We'll need to verify everything independently," she'd explained, "and given that he's currently married to your mother, we need to be extremely careful. We can't have him destroying evidence or fleeing." "Or hurting my mother," I'd added quietly. "That too. Do you have somewhere safe to stay? Someone who might be watching for you?" I'd assured her I'd be careful, but the truth was I felt exposed and vulnerable. Richard knew I was on to him now. The question was what he'd do about it. That afternoon, I sat in the office of Daniel Morrison, the private investigator Sarah had recommended. His office was in an older building downtown, the kind with creaky elevators and frosted glass doors. But his reputation was solid, and more importantly, he specialized in financial crimes and hidden assets. So you want me to dig into Richard Winters?" he said, reviewing the notes he'd taken during my explanation. Morrison was in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "The FBI has the criminal side, but you want to know what else he's hiding." "Everything," I confirmed. "I know he destroyed his previous company, but what happened before that? What happened to the money he stole and—" I hesitated, then forged ahead. "I think there might be another family somewhere. Things my grandmother said, comments about him being gone at odd times." Morrison nodded. "A parallel life isn't uncommon with men like this. They compartmentalize, creating different identities for different purposes. Give me 48 hours for a preliminary report. I'll need access to whatever financial records you have." I handed over copies of what I'd found in the safety deposit box, keeping the originals secure. Morrison whistled low when he saw the Cayman Islands account information. "This is a good start. Most people don't realize how much of a trail money leaves even when someone's trying to hide it." I left Morrison's office feeling like I'd set important wheels in motion, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every face on the street seemed suspicious, every car that drove too slowly past me a potential threat. My phone rang as I waited for an Uber. It was Marcus. "Alex, what the hell did you do?" His voice was panicked. "Richard is going ballistic. He says you broke into his office and stole documents. Mom's in tears." "I didn't break into anything," I said carefully, "but I did find evidence that Richard isn't who he claims to be. Evidence of what, Alex, you need to stop this vendetta against him. Just apologize, and maybe we can fix this mess before Christmas." "Marcus, he killed Dad." The words hung in the air between us. I heard my brother's sharp intake of breath. You can't just say things like that. Dad died from his cancer treatment." "No, he didn't. I have proof. Medical records forged prescriptions recordings of Richard threatening him. Dad gathered it all before he died and left it for me to find." "You're lying," but his voice was uncertain now. "I'm not, and that's just the beginning. He embezzled money, destroyed his own company, possibly killed 3 other people. He's been systematically destroying our family to cover his tracks." "Why should I believe you? Richard showed us those emails you sent, the horrible things you said about us." "Those emails were fake, Marcus. Check the email addresses carefully. He created fake accounts to impersonate me, just like he manipulated Tom back into gambling to blackmail Sarah, just like he set up James with that fake affair." Silence stretched between us. Finally, Marcus spoke, his voice small. "The car collection." "What?" "Dad's car collection. Richard promised it to me if I helped convince Mom you were a problem. But last week, I went to check on the cars and half of them are gone. Richard said Dad must have sold them before he died, but I know that's not true. Dad would never have sold the '67 Mustang. He restored it himself. Richard sold them, I said gently, just like he's been slowly selling off everything of value while keeping Mom too confused and scared to notice. Oh, God! I could hear the horror dawning in his voice. What have I done, Alex? I voted to exclude you. I told you not to come for Christmas. Our own sister and I. You were manipulated by a professional con artist and killer. This isn't your fault, Marcus. I need to think. I need to. He paused. Is it safe to talk to you? Richard made it sound like you were dangerous. I'm only dangerous to him. Marcus, be careful. Don't confront him. The FBI is involved now. Just act normal until they can move in. The FBI, this is really happening. It's really happening. And Marcus, I love you. No matter what Richard made you believe about me, I love you and I forgive you. I heard what sounded like a choked sob before the line went dead. 2 days later, Morrison called me back to his office. The preliminary report was ready, and his expression told me it wasn't good news. Your instincts were right. He began sliding a thick folder across his desk. Richard Winters has been living multiple lives for over a decade. I opened the folder to find photographs, documents, and what looked like surveillance reports. The first photo showed Richard with a woman I didn't recognize and 2 teenage boys. Meet Linda Summers and her sons, Kyle and Jason, Morrison said. Richard has been married to her for 12 years. They live in Riverside, about 2 hours from here. As far as she knows, her husband, Rick Summers, is a traveling medical equipment salesman. My stomach turned. He's bigamist on top of everything else. It gets worse. He has a third identity in Michigan, Robert Winter, married to Patricia Coleman for 8 years. They have a daughter, Emma, age 6. I stared at the photos of these other families, these other women Richard had deceived. Do they know? Not yet. He's kept each life completely separate. Different bank accounts, different social security numbers. Yes, he has multiple fake identities with official documentation. He spends roughly a third of his time with each family using business travel as his excuse for being gone. How does he afford all this? Morrison flipped to another section of the report. That's where it gets interesting. The money from Stronghold Construction was just the beginning. He's been running various schemes for 15 years. Insurance fraud, identity theft, investment scams. We've tracked at least $3 million in stolen funds, possibly more. $3 million. Hidden in various accounts, real estate holdings and shell companies. Your mother's house? He's taken out 3 mortgages on it without her knowledge. The equity is gone. He's also been slowly transferring her retirement accounts into his name. I felt sick. She's going to be left with nothing. If he completes his plan, yes, but there's more. Morrison pulled out another set of documents. Remember those 3 suspicious deaths your father documented? I found 2 more. Both women who discovered his multiple identities. Both died in accidents within weeks of confronting him. The pattern was clear and terrifying. Richard didn't just destroy people financially, he eliminated anyone who threatened his carefully constructed lies. There's something else, Morrison continued. I traced his history back to his real identity. His actual name is Ronald Fitzgerald. He supposedly died in a warehouse fire 20 years ago, but the body was too burned for positive identification. I think he faked his death and has been creating new identities ever since. What started all this? Best I can tell, he was about to be arrested for killing his first wife. She'd discovered he'd been embezzling from her father's business. She died in a fall down the stairs 2 days before she was supposed to meet with prosecutors. Ronald Fitzgerald died in that convenient fire a week later. I closed the folder, overwhelmed by the magnitude of Ronald's crimes. This wasn't just a con man who'd infiltrated my family. This was a serial killer with a decades-long trail of bodies and destroyed lives. We need to warn those other women, I said. Morrison nodded. I agree, but we need to be careful. If he realizes we know about them, they could be in immediate danger. I've shared everything with my contact at the FBI. They're coordinating with authorities in the other states. How long before they arrest him? Soon. They're building an airtight case. Your evidence gave them the roadmap, and now they're filling in all the details. But Alexandra, you need to stay vigilant. Cornered animals are the most dangerous. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Linda Summers and Patricia Coleman going about their lives with no idea they were married to a killer. I thought about Emma Richards' 6-year-old daughter in Michigan, growing up with a monster for a father. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You should have left it alone. My blood ran cold. A second text followed. Your mother says hello. I immediately called my mother's phone. No answer. I tried Marcus. Nothing. Panic rising, I called Sarah. Something's wrong, I said as soon as she answered. Richard just texted me. I think he has Mom. I'm at their house now, Sarah said, and I could hear the fear in her voice. Richard told everyone there's a family emergency, and we all need to come over. He seems calm, but there's something in his eyes. Don't go inside, I warned. Make an excuse. Leave now. Too late. I'm already in the living room with Marcus' Aunt Marie and Grandma Dorothy. Your mom's here too, but she looks drugged. Maybe she's just sitting there not responding to anyone. I'm calling the FBI right now. Try to get everyone out if you can. He's coming back, Sarah whispered. I have to go. The line went dead. I immediately called Agent Chen but got her voicemail. I left a frantic message, then called 911. There's a hostage situation developing, I said, giving them my mother's address. The suspect is armed and dangerous. Please send units immediately. But even as I made the call, I knew I couldn't wait for help. Richard was making his final move, gathering the family either as hostages or to eliminate witnesses, and it was my fault. I'd forced his hand by exposing his secrets. I grabbed my keys and ran for my car. I'd sworn to be careful to let the authorities handle it, but my family was in danger because of me. I couldn't sit safely in my apartment while Richard did God knows what to the people I loved. As I drove through the dark streets, breaking every speed limit, I prayed I wouldn't be too late. Richard had taken so much from me already. I wouldn't let him take any more. I parked 3 houses down from my childhood home, my hands shaking as I turned off the engine. Every window was lit, making the house look deceptively welcoming in the winter darkness. But I knew better. Somewhere inside, Richard was holding my family hostage. My phone vibrated. Marcus. Don't come here, he whispered urgently. He's lost it, Alex. He's got a gun. Where are you? Locked in the downstairs bathroom. He doesn't know I have my phone. Alex, he's been ranting about you about Dad. He keeps saying this is all your fault. Is everyone okay, Mom? She's barely conscious. I think he drugged her tea. Sarah's trying to keep him calm, but he's getting more agitated. He has everyone in the living room. I called the police. They should be there soon. He'll hear the sirens. Alex, I think he's planning to... I heard him tell Grandma Dorothy that sometimes families need to end together. What does that mean? I knew exactly what it meant. Richard was planning a murder-suicide, taking everyone with him rather than face justice. Marcus, you need to get out of there. I can't leave them. This is my fault too. I helped him turn everyone against you. I was so stupid, so greedy. He promised me Dad's cars and I just... Marcus, listen to me. This isn't your fault. But I need you to do something. Is there any way you can create a distraction? Maybe trigger the smoke alarm or break something. Maybe. There's cleaning supplies under the sink here. If I mix the wrong things... Be careful. Just enough smoke to set off the alarm, not enough to hurt anyone. Alex, in case something happens. I'm sorry for everything. You were the best sister, and I let him convince me you were the enemy. I love you. I love you too. Now go create that distraction. I crept closer to the house, staying in the shadows. Through the living room window, I could see Richard pacing back and forth, gesturing wildly with something in his hand, a gun, just as Marcus had said. Sarah was on the couch, her arm around Grandma Dorothy. Aunt Marie sat rigid in Dad's old recliner, and Mom was slumped in her chair, eyes closed. Where were the police? Then I heard it, the piercing shriek of the smoke alarm. Through the window, I saw Richard spin around, momentarily confused. That's when Sarah struck. She grabbed a heavy glass vase from the side table and swung it at Richard's head. But Richard was quicker than he looked. He dodged the vase, grazing his shoulder, and backhanded Sarah across the face. She crumpled to the floor. "Stupid woman," he roared loud enough that I could hear him outside. "Did you think you could stop me? I've eliminated smarter people than you." Grandma Dorothy tried to stand, but Richard pointed the gun at her. "Sit down, old woman. You're part of the reason I'm in this mess. If you just minded your own business about those pill bottles." The smoke alarm continued its assault on everyone's ears. I saw Richard's attention fracture, trying to watch his hostages while figuring out where the smoke was coming from. This was my chance. I tried the back door, locked, of course. But I still had my key, the one I'd carried for years even after moving out. Some sentimental part of me had never been able to let it go. The lock turned silently. I eased the door open, wincing at every tiny creak. The kitchen was dark, but I could hear Richard still ranting in the living room. 20 years, he was shouting. 20 years of careful planning, and that sanctimonious Bill Patterson had to document everything. Couldn't just die quietly like he was supposed to. No, he had to leave breadcrumbs for his precious daughter. I grabbed a knife from the block on the counter, though I had no idea what I'd do with it. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. "And Helen," Richard continued, his voice dripping with contempt. "So easy to manipulate, so desperate for love after her husband died. She never questioned anything, never wondered why I was so interested in a widow with grown children. Pathetic." Anger burned through my fear. How dare he talk about my mother that way? I peered around the corner. Richard had his back to me, still waving the gun as he monologued like a villain in a bad movie. Sarah was stirring on the floor. Grandma Dorothy was holding Aunt Marie's hand. And Mom's eyes were open now, though unfocused. "But it's over now," Richard said, suddenly calm. "The police will be here soon thanks to Alexandra, so we'll all go together. A family tragedy. Murder-suicide brought on by a bitter daughter's lies." No. The word came from an unexpected source. Marcus stood in the doorway to the hall, his clothes reeking of whatever chemical combination he'd created. "No more, Richard. Let them go." Richard laughed an ugly sound. "The prodigal son finally grows a spine. Too late, boy. You're as guilty as I am. You helped turn them against your own sister for the promise of some classic cars. What kind of man does that make you?" "A weak one," Marcus admitted. "A greedy, jealous fool, but not a killer. Let them go, and I'll tell everyone it was all my idea, that I forced you to help me get Alex out of the family." Touching, but no. You think I don't know what Alexandra found your father, documented everything. My real name, my history, my other families. It's over. But I'll be damned if I go to prison. I'll die first and take all of you with me. That's when we heard them sirens in the distance getting closer. Richard's face contorted with rage. He swung the gun toward Marcus. "You first, then. The disappointment of a son who sold out his sister for cars." "No." I burst from the kitchen, knife in hand. Richard spun toward me, and for a moment time seemed to freeze. I saw surprise flicker across his face, then calculation. "Alexandra, come to watch your family die." "It's over, Richard. Or should I say, Ronald Fitzgerald, who killed his first wife and faked his own death, who's been running from justice for 20 years. His face went white. "How do you—" "I know everything about Linda and Patricia, about Emma, your daughter in Michigan, about all the people you've killed. The FBI knows too. You can't run anymore." The sirens were getting louder. Richard's gun hand was shaking now, swinging between me and the others. They were all necessary, he said almost to himself. Every death was necessary. They would have exposed me, ruined everything. Like my father. Especially your father. He was too smart, too thorough. Even dying, he was gathering evidence. I had to speed things along. There it was, the confession. You poisoned him. Digoxin. So easy to pass off as chemotherapy complications. He was dying anyway. I just helped him along. You murdered him, I said, taking a step closer. And for what money? For survival, Richard shouted. You have no idea what it's like to reinvent yourself over and over, to always be looking over your shoulder. Your father threatened all of that. The front door burst open. Police officers flooded in, weapons drawn. Drop the gun, they commanded. Richard looked around wildly, realizing he was surrounded. His gaze settled on my mother, still semi-conscious in her chair. If I can't have my life, at least I can take hers, he snarled, swinging the gun toward her. I didn't think. I just moved, throwing myself between the gun and my mother. The shot was deafening in the enclosed space. I felt the bullet punch into my shoulder, spinning me around. I hit the floor hard, my vision going gray at the edges. But that was all Richard managed. The police tackled him, wrestling the gun away. I heard him screaming about frame-ups and conspiracies as they dragged him out. Marcus was beside me, pressing something against my shoulder. Stay with me, sis. The ambulance is coming. Through the pain, I could see my family gathering around, Sarah holding her bruised face, Grandma Dorothy, tears streaming down her cheeks, Aunt Marie gripping my hand. And Mom. Mom was fully awake now, whatever drugs Richard had given her wearing off. She knelt beside me, her face a mask of horror and dawning comprehension. My baby, she whispered. What have I done? What have I let happen? Not your fault, I managed. He fooled everyone. The FBI wants to talk to all of you, a police officer was saying. But first, let's get her to the hospital. As the EMTs loaded me onto a stretcher, I caught Marcus's eye. The cars. He actually laughed, though it was choked with tears. Forget the cars. I just want my sister back. You never lost me, I told him. Family doesn't give up on each other. The last thing I saw before they closed the ambulance doors was Richard being shoved into a police car, his careful mask finally shattered, revealing the monster beneath. He'd tried to destroy us, but he'd failed. We were damaged, yes, betrayed and manipulated and hurt, but we were still a family, and families heal. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and floor wax, a combination that took me back to my father's final days. But unlike then, the atmosphere wasn't heavy with impending loss. My shoulder throbbed, despite the pain medication, a constant reminder of how close Richard's bullet had come to ending everything. It had been 3 days since the confrontation, 3 days of police interviews, FBI debriefings, and awkward hospital visits from family members struggling with guilt and shame. Richard was in federal custody, held without bail on charges ranging from attempted murder to bigamy to fraud. The news media was having a field day with the story of the man who'd lived 3 lives while leaving a trail of bodies across multiple states. I was reviewing my statement for what felt like the 100th time when my phone rang. Unknown number. Ms. Patterson, this is Thomas Morrison from Morrison, Kellerman and Associates. I sat up straighter, wincing at the movement. How can I help you? Actually, I believe I'm the one who can help you. I represent your late father's interests. We've been monitoring certain triggers regarding his estate, and one was activated when you accessed his safety deposit box. Triggers. Your father was a very thorough man, Ms. Patterson. He established several legal mechanisms that would activate under specific circumstances. The primary trigger was if you were ever excluded from a major family gathering. It seems that condition has been met. My mind raced. My father anticipated I'd be excluded from Christmas. He anticipated that someone might try to isolate you from the family to prevent you from discovering certain truths. He was particularly concerned about your mother's vulnerability to manipulation after his death. He knew about Richard. He suspected someone would try to infiltrate the family, maybe not Richard specifically, but someone with malicious intent. That's why he created the Patterson Family Trust with very specific activation clauses. I gripped the phone tighter. What kind of trust? Well, one that transfers all family assets into your control if certain conditions are met. Being excluded from a family gathering was one trigger. Attempted harm to you was another. We've been monitoring the situation and both conditions have now been satisfied. Wait, you're saying my father set up a trust that gives me control over all family assets if I was excluded from Christmas? Not just excluded, but excluded as part of a deliberate attempt to isolate you from family resources or information. The trust documents are quite specific. Your father wanted to ensure that if someone tried to manipulate the family against you, you'd have the power to protect everyone's interests. This was incredible. Even from beyond the grave, my father had been protecting us. What assets are we talking about? The family home, your mother's accounts that haven't been compromised, several investment properties your father purchased quietly over the years, and a substantial life insurance policy that Richard Winters apparently didn't know about. All told, approximately $2.3 million in assets. I nearly dropped the phone. $2.3 million, but Richard drained everything. He drained what he could find. Your father was smarter than that. He created shell companies' secondary accounts as hidden investments, things that would only surface when the trust activated. There's also the matter of the construction company. Patterson Construction went under after Dad died. The public-facing company did, but the contracts, the equipment, the client relationships your father transferred, all of that to a holding company before his death. It's been dormant, waiting. With Richard's crimes exposed, several former clients have expressed interest in reviving business relationships. My head was spinning. This changed everything. What do I need to do? First, you need to get well. Second, we need to meet to go over all the documentation. The trust gives you broad powers, but also responsibilities. You'll be the trustee for your entire family's financial future. My family that voted to exclude me from Christmas, I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Your family that was manipulated by a master criminal, Morrison corrected gently. Your father's letter with the trust documents addresses this. Would you like me to read the relevant section? Please. I heard papers rustling, then Morrison's voice. My dearest Alexandra, if you're reading this, then my worst fears have come true. Someone has turned our family against you. Please don't blame them. Fear and manipulation can make good people do terrible things. As trustee, you'll have the power to punish or protect. I trust you to choose protection. They will need you, even if they don't know it yet. Especially your mother. Love them through their mistakes as I have loved you through yours. The money and assets are just tools. Use them to rebuild what was broken. Our family is worth saving. Tears rolled down my cheeks. Even anticipating betrayal, my father had chosen forgiveness. He'd given me the power not for revenge, but for restoration. There's more, Morrison continued. The trust includes provisions for prosecuting anyone who harmed family members. We've already been in contact with the FBI about recovering assets Richard stole. Between insurance and legal action, we expect to recover most of what was taken. What about Richard's other families, Linda and Patricia? Morrison's voice warmed. Your father would have been proud of you for asking. While the trust doesn't directly provide for them, you'll have discretionary funds. As trustee, you can choose to help victims of Richard's crimes. A knock on my door interrupted us. Mr. Morrison, can I call you back? Someone's here. Of course. Rest and recover. We'll talk soon. I hung up to find Marcus hovering in the doorway, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his usual confidence had been replaced by something fragile and uncertain. "Can I come in?" he asked. I nodded, watching as he pulled a chair close to my bed. We sat in silence for a moment before he spoke. "I've been thinking about what you said in the ambulance, about family not giving up on each other, but I gave up on you. I chose cars over my sister." "You were manipulated, Marcus. Richard spent months building a case against me, making you believe things that weren't true. But I should have known better. You've never been anything but generous to this family. Remember when I needed money for trade school? You didn't hesitate. When Emma broke up with me and I showed up at your apartment drunk at 3 in the morning. You let me cry on your couch and made me pancakes. That's what sisters do. And what did I do? I voted to ban you from Christmas for the promise of some cars that were already sold." His voice broke. "I helped that monster isolate you. If you hadn't found that evidence, if you hadn't been so brave." "Marcus, stop. Richard is responsible for Richard's actions, not you." "I betrayed you." The words came out raw, full of self-loathing. "I'm your brother. I'm supposed to protect you, not throw you to the wolves for material gain." I reached out with my good arm and took his hand. "You want to know something strange? I'm almost grateful this happened." Marcus looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "You got shot. You were excluded from our family. How can you be grateful?" "Because it exposed the truth. Richard would have continued stealing, manipulating, maybe even killing if this hadn't forced his hand. Dad's death would have gone unavenged. And," I squeezed his hand, "it showed me who my family really is. Not the people who voted in that meeting, but the ones who came back, who stood up to Richard even when they were terrified. You created that distraction knowing he had a gun. That's who you really are. I don't deserve your forgiveness." "It's not about deserving. It's about choosing to move forward together. Richard tried to destroy us by turning us against each other. We can't let him win." Marcus broke down, then sobbing like I hadn't seen since we were children. I held him with my good arm, letting him pour out months of guilt and manipulation. "The worst part," he said when he could speak again, "is that I think part of me always knew something was wrong. The way Richard would pit us against each other, how he'd remind me of every time you'd succeeded where I'd failed. But it was easier to resent you than to question him." "He was very good at finding people's weak spots," I said. "For you, it was feeling overshadowed. For Sarah, it was Tom's gambling. For everyone, it was something different." "How's Mom, Buzz?" I asked, changing the subject. Marcus's face darkened. "Not good. She's staying with Aunt Marie right now. The doctor said Richard had been drugging her for months. Small doses of sedatives to keep her compliant. She's clearing up physically but emotionally. She keeps saying she should have known, that she betrayed Dad's memory by bringing that monster into our home. It's not her fault either. Try telling her that. She won't eat, barely speaks. Grandma Dorothy is worried she might hurt herself." The weight of Richard's crimes seemed to grow heavier. He hadn't just stolen money or told lies. He'd shattered people's sense of self, their trust in their own judgment. "There's something else," Marcus said. "The police found journals in Richard's office, detailed notes about each of us, our weaknesses, our fears, how to manipulate us. It's like we were lab rats in his experiment." "Have you seen them?" "The FBI showed me mine. It was illuminating and horrifying. He knew exactly which buttons to push, even had contingency plans for if his primary manipulation didn't work." My phone buzzed with a text from Agent Chen. "Richard's other families have been notified. Both women are in protective custody. Patricia wants to speak with you when you're ready." Patricia, Richard's wife in Michigan, mother of 6-year-old Emma, another victim trying to process the revelation that her life was built on lies. "Marcus," I said suddenly, "I need to tell you something. Dad set up a trust. It activated when I was excluded from Christmas. I'm now in control of all family assets." His face went pale. "Oh, God, are you going to... I'd understand if you cut me off. I deserve it." "No, Marcus, no. The trust isn't for revenge. It's for rebuilding. Dad wanted me to protect the family, even from ourselves, especially from ourselves. So what happens now? Now we heal, we rebuild, we make sure Richard pays for what he's done, and we help his other victims. We honor Dad's memory by being the family he believed we could be. Marcus nodded, then attempted a weak smile. Does this mean I'm uninvited from Christmas? Don't be ridiculous, but you're definitely on dish duty. It was a small joke, but it broke something loose between us. Not forgiveness exactly, that would take time, but a beginning. After Marcus left, I lay back against the pillows, processing everything Morrison had told me. My father had outmaneuvered Richard from beyond the grave, ensuring his family would be protected, even if we couldn't protect ourselves. But with great power came great responsibility, $2.3 million, and control over my family's future. The daughter they'd voted to exclude now held their financial fate in her hands. Richard had thought making me an outcast would neutralize me. Instead, he'd activated the very safeguards my father had put in place. It was almost poetic justice. My phone rang again, Agent Chen this time. Alexandra, I have an update. We've linked Richard to 2 more murders in California, and we found something else in his records. A contract on you dated last week. He hired someone to kill you if you got too close to the truth. My blood ran cold. Is the person in custody? Yes. He gave Richard up immediately once we arrested him. Your father's paranoia saved your life. Those safety measures Morrison mentioned, they included hiring security to watch you discreetly. They intercepted the hitman before he could act. Even dead, my father was protecting me. Thank you for telling me. There's going to be a press conference tomorrow, the scale of Richard's crimes. This is national news now. Are you prepared for that? My family's pain was about to become public entertainment. But maybe that was necessary. Maybe exposing Richard completely was the only way to truly free ourselves from his influence. I'm prepared, I said. Let the world see what he really is. After Agent Chen hung up, I closed my eyes, exhausted but unable to sleep. In a strange way, Richard had given me a gift. By orchestrating my exclusion, he'd activated my father's trust. By pushing me away, he'd given me the power to pull my family back together. The road ahead would be difficult. Trust would need to be rebuilt. Wounds would need to heal. But we had the tools now: financial security, legal support, and most importantly, the truth. Richard had tried to destroy the Patterson family. Instead, he'd forged us into something stronger. We'd been tested by fire and survived. Now it was time to rebuild from the ashes. December the 24th arrived with a bitter wind that rattled the windows of my apartment. I'd been released from the hospital a week earlier, my shoulder healing, but still tender. The media circus surrounding Richard's arrest had finally died down, though reporters still occasionally called for comments about the bigamist killer, as they dubbed him. I was packing a bag for tomorrow, my first Christmas with my family, since everything imploded when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw a woman I didn't recognize. Mid-60s, silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun, wearing a coat that had seen better days but was meticulously maintained. Can I help you? I called through the door. Alexandra Patterson. I'm Janet Chen, your Aunt Janet from Seattle, your mother's sister. I fumbled with the locks, throwing open the door. I'd tried calling Aunt Janet several times, but had only reached voicemail. Aunt Janet. Come in, please. I've been trying to reach you. She stepped inside, her sharp eyes taking in everything. I know. I'm sorry I didn't respond sooner. I needed to gather some things first. Evidence. Evidence. She set a worn leather briefcase on my kitchen table. I've been investigating Richard Winters for 3 years, ever since he married Helen. I stared at her. You have? Sit down, dear. There are things you need to know. Things I should have acted on sooner, but I was trying to protect Helen. I see now that was a mistake. I made us both tea while Janet unpacked her briefcase. File folders, photographs, and what looked like bank statements covered my table. "I never trusted him," she began. "The way he swooped in when Helen was grieving, how quickly he moved from sympathy to romance. It felt calculated. So I started digging." "What did you find?" "At first, just small inconsistencies. He said he'd worked for Stronghold Construction, but no one there remembered him in the positions he claimed. He said he'd gone to Ohio State, but they had no record of him. Little lies that could have been exaggerations, but they bothered me." She pulled out a photograph. It showed Richard at what looked like a funeral standing next to a woman I didn't recognize. "This is from 2012. Richard at the funeral of Margaret Winters, his supposed first wife who died in a car accident. Notice anything?" I studied the photo. Richard looked genuinely grief-stricken, a masterful performance. But in the background, "That's my father. Why was my father at Richard's wife's funeral?" Exactly my question. So I dug deeper. Turns out, Margaret Winters worked for your father's company as an accountant. She died 2 weeks after discovering discrepancies in the books someone was skimming from client payments. My heart pounded. Richard was stealing from Dad's company through Margaret. She was the inside person moving money to offshore accounts. Your father suspected, but couldn't prove it. Then Margaret died in that convenient accident and the theft stopped. Your father could never prove the connection. So Richard knew my father before he ever met Mom. Oh yes, I believe Richard blamed your father for Margaret's death. In his twisted mind, if Bill hadn't investigated, Margaret would still be alive. Never mind that Richard was the one who involved her in embezzlement, and then likely killed her when she became a liability. This is insane. He planned everything for years. Janet pulled out more documents. After Margaret died, Richard disappeared for 2 years. Then he resurfaced with a new identity, working for Stronghold Construction, your father's biggest competitor. We know what happened there. He destroyed them from the inside. But Janet, why didn't you say something? Why didn't you warn us? Her face crumpled slightly. I tried. When Richard first started dating Helen, I told her my concerns. She accused me of being jealous, of not wanting her to be happy. We had a terrible fight. She said if I couldn't support her relationship, I wasn't welcome in her life. So he isolated Mom from you too. His specialty. By the time I had real evidence, Helen wouldn't take my calls. Marcus told me I was creating drama. Even your father. She paused. What about my father? I reached out to Bill about 6 months before his diagnosis, told him my suspicions. He said he was handling it, that he had his own investigation going. Then he got sick, and I thought I was being paranoid, that grief was making me see conspiracies where there were none. She pulled out another file, but I kept watching, and I found something no one else did. Remember Dr. Morrison, the oncologist who treated your father? Of course, he was devastated when Dad died. Did you know Richard's second identity, Rick Summers, worked as a pharmaceutical sales rep, and that Dr. Morrison was one of his clients? The room spun. Richard had access to my father's doctor. More than access. He was providing Dr. Morrison with samples of various medications for clinical trials, including experimental heart medications that, in the wrong combinations, could cause exactly the kind of heart failure your father experienced. Oh God, I covered my mouth, feeling sick. I can't prove Richard tampered with your father's medications, but the timing, the access, the motive, it all lines up. I think Richard murdered your father as revenge for Margaret's death and to gain access to your mother and her assets. We need to tell the FBI. This could add murder charges. I already have, Janet interrupted. I met with Agent Chen yesterday, gave her everything. She said it corroborates other evidence they found. We sat in silence for a moment, absorbing the magnitude of Richard's planning. This wasn't opportunistic crime. This was a years-long revenge plot that had destroyed multiple lives. There's one more thing, Janet said quietly, and this is why I came in person on Christmas Eve. She pulled out a small wrapped box. This was in my safety deposit box. Your father gave it to me that day he called about my suspicions. He said, if anything happened to him, I should give this to you when the time was right. I took the box with trembling hands. Inside was a USB drive and another letter in my father's handwriting. My dearest Alexandra, if Janet is giving you this, then my worst fears have come true, and Richard has shown his true nature. This drive contains everything I couldn't put in the bank box recordings of Richard threatening me, details about Margaret Winters, and evidence of his crimes I couldn't obtain legally. But more importantly, it contains videos I recorded for you and the family. Messages I hoped you'd never need but wanted to leave just in case. There's one for you, for Marcus, for your mother, and even one for the family to watch together. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you all better, but I knew if anyone could save our family from this evil, it would be you. You have your mother's heart and my stubborn streak. Use them both. Janet has been a true ally. Trust her as I did. And remember, families can survive betrayal, loss, even murder. What they can't survive is giving up on each other. All my love, Dad. Tears streamed down my face as I clutched the letter. Even facing death, possibly murder, my father had thought of us, had planned for our healing. Have you watched the videos? I asked Janet. No, they're not for me, but I think you should watch yours tonight, before tomorrow, before you see the family. I nodded, then impulsively hugged her. Thank you for not giving up, for continuing to investigate, even when everyone pushed you away. That's what family does, she said simply. We protect each other, even when they don't want protection. After Janet left, promising to join us for Christmas dinner the next day, I sat at my computer with the USB drive. My hands shook as I clicked on the file labeled for Alexandra. My father's face filled the screen. He looked tired, thinner than I remembered, but his eyes were bright with purpose. Hello, sweetheart. If you're watching this, then I'm gone and you've discovered the truth about Richard. First, let me say how proud I am of you. I knew you'd be the one to uncover everything. You always were the persistent one. I need you to know that I don't blame your mother for Richard. He's a master manipulator who preys on grief and loneliness. Helen will need you more than ever once the truth comes out. She'll blame herself, maybe even want to give up. Don't let her. Remind her that she's stronger than she knows. Marcus will struggle with guilt over his role in Richard's plan. He's always felt overshadowed by you, and Richard exploited that brilliantly. But Marcus is a good man at heart. He just needs to believe in himself as much as I believe in him. The family will fracture before it heals. There will be blame, anger, accusations. Weather it all with grace. Be the anchor they need. The trust I set up isn't just about money. It's about giving you the tools to rebuild. And Alexandra, don't forget to forgive yourself. I know you'll blame yourself for not seeing the truth sooner, for not being there when I got sick. But this isn't your fault. It's not anyone's fault except Richard's. I love you, sweetheart. I love our whole messy, complicated family. Take care of them for me. And remember, the best revenge against someone who tried to destroy your family is to emerge stronger than ever. Merry Christmas, my darling girl. I'll be watching. The video ended, leaving me sobbing at my kitchen table, but they were healing tears, cathartic tears. My father had given me one last gift: permission to forgive myself and others, and the wisdom to rebuild what Richard had tried to destroy. Tomorrow would be difficult. Facing the family who'd voted to exclude me, sitting at a table where Richard had once held court. But I'd do it. Not for revenge or to lord my new power over them, but because Dad was right. The best revenge against Richard was to heal, to unite, to become the family he'd tried to prevent us from being. I spent the rest of Christmas Eve watching the other videos, preparing myself for tomorrow. Each message was perfectly tailored to its recipient, showing how well my father had known us all. His message to Mom was gentle but empowering. To Marcus, encouraging and affirming. The The family message was about forgiveness and moving forward. As midnight approached, I made a decision. I wouldn't tell them about the videos yet. Tomorrow was for beginning to heal. The videos could come later when they were ready to hear Dad's voice again without completely breaking down. But I would tell them about Janet's investigation, about how long Richard had been planning this, about how none of us stood a chance against such calculated evil, not to excuse our actions, but to begin understanding how we'd all been pawns in a game that started before we even knew we were playing. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "I know I have no right to ask, but please come tomorrow. We need you. I need you." I typed back, "I'll be there. We're family. Always." Richard had thought excluding me from Christmas would be his final victory. Instead, it would be the beginning of his complete defeat. Because tomorrow, the Patterson family would gather not as his victims, but as survivors. And that was the best Christmas gift I could imagine. Christmas morning dawned crisp and clear, the kind of perfect winter day that belonged on greeting cards. I stood outside my childhood home, my mother's house, holding a poinsettia in my good arm and gathering courage with each breath. The last time I'd been here, Richard had shot me. Now he was in federal custody, and I was about to walk into a family gathering I'd been voted out of just weeks before. The door opened before I could knock. Mom stood there looking fragile but determined. She'd lost weight, her face showing the strain of the past weeks, but her eyes were clear, no longer clouded by the sedatives Richard had been feeding her. "Alexandra," she whispered, then pulled me into a careful hug, mindful of my shoulder. "My baby, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." "It's okay, Mom. We're going to be okay." The living room was full but quiet. Marcus sat on the couch next to Sarah, who still had faint bruising on her face from Richard's backhand. Grandma Dorothy was in her usual chair clutching a handkerchief. Aunt Marie perched nervously on the ottoman, while Janet commanded Dad's old recliner with quiet authority. Everyone looked up as I entered, the weight of collective guilt almost palpable in the air. Before anyone says anything, I began setting down the poinsettia. I want to make something clear. We were all victims of a master manipulator. Richard spent years planning this, studying us, finding our weaknesses. We need to stop blaming ourselves and each other. "But we voted," Grandma Dorothy said, her voice shaking. "We sat around this very room and voted to exclude you from Christmas. How do we forgive ourselves for that?" "By understanding how it happened," I said, pulling out the USB drive my father had left, "and by learning the whole truth." I'd brought my laptop, anticipating this moment. As I set it up on the coffee table, I explained about Janet's investigation, about Richard's connection to my father, going back years before he met Mom. "Margaret Winters wasn't just Richard's first wife," I explained. "She worked for Dad's company. She was embezzling on Richard's behalf, and when she got caught, she died in a convenient accident. Richard blamed Dad for her death and spent years planning revenge." "Dear God," Mom breathed. "He targeted me. Our whole relationship was—" "A lie," Janet confirmed gently. "I'm sorry, Helen. I tried to warn you, but—" "I wouldn't listen," Mom finished. "I was so lonely after Bill died, and Richard seemed so understanding. He knew exactly what to say, didn't he? Because he'd been studying us." I pulled up a file on the laptop. Dad knew something was wrong. He couldn't prove Richard killed his first wife, but he suspected. And when he got sick, I paused, steeling myself. Richard had access to Dad's oncologist through his pharmaceutical sales identity. We think he tampered with Dad's medications to cause the heart failure. The room erupted in gasps and cries. Marcus jumped to his feet, pacing angrily. "He murdered Dad. That bastard murdered our father." "The FBI is investigating," I said. "With everything else they have on him, he'll never see freedom again. But that's not what I want to show you today." I navigated to another folder on the USB drive. The night before Richard orchestrated that family meeting, I found something in an old jewelry box Dad left me. It was hidden in the lining, a small digital recorder. Everyone leaned forward as I hit play. At first, there was just rustling, then voices became clear. "You need to increase the dosage," Richard's voice said. "He's still too strong, too coherent." "I've already given him more than recommended," another voice replied, Dr. Morrison. "Any more could what kill him? He's already dying. We're just hastening the inevitable. Unless you'd prefer I tell the medical board about your little prescription drug side business." "This is blackmail." "This is business. Bill Patterson destroyed my life. He drove Margaret to her death. Now I'm returning the favor. His family will suffer as mine did." "What about his daughter Alexandra seems to suspect?" "Alexandra will be handled when the time comes. First, Bill needs to die. Then I'll marry Helen, get access to everything. And when I'm ready, I'll turn the family against Alexandra. She'll be so isolated, so alone she won't know what hit her, just like I was after Margaret died." The recording continued detailing Richard's exact plans for our family, how he'd use Marcus's insecurity, Sarah's husband's gambling problem, everyone's individual weaknesses. It was like listening to a predator plan his hunt. When it finally ended, the room was silent, except for Mom's quiet sobbing. "He recorded this for us," I said softly. "Dad knew he was being murdered, but couldn't go to the police while Richard had leverage over Dr. Morrison. So he gathered evidence, instead hid it for us to find." "How long?" Aunt Marie asked, her voice hollow. "How long was that monster planning this?" "Years," Janet answered. "My investigation suggests he started positioning himself the moment Bill's company exposed the embezzlement scheme. Everything since then, working at Stronghold, meeting Helen at the grief support group, the marriage, it was all calculated revenge." I pulled up another file. "There's more. Dad left videos for each of us. Messages he recorded when he realized he might not survive Richard's plan. But before I show them, I need you all to understand something." I stood facing my family. "Richard's gone. He's in federal custody, charged with multiple murders, fraud, bigamy, and attempted murder. His other families are safe and getting help. The FBI has frozen his assets and is tracking down every crime he committed. He's done." "But the damage," Mom whispered, "what he did to us, to you, can be healed," I finished firmly. "Dad believed that. He set up safeguards to protect us even after his death. The trust that activated when you excluded me, he designed it specifically to give me the power to protect the family if someone tried to infiltrate it." "So you control everything now," Marcus said, not accusingly, but with a kind of wonder. "The house, the money, all of it." "I do, and my first act as trustee is going to be rebuilding what Richard tried to destroy. Mom, the mortgages Richard took out on the house, I'm paying them off. The retirement funds he drained, I'm replenishing them from the hidden accounts Dad set up. Sarah Tom's gambling debts to those dangerous people, they're cleared, I've already arranged it." Sarah gasped. "Alexandra, you can't." "I can, and I did. Richard created those debts to control you. I'm breaking his chains." "What about Dad's company?" Marcus asked quietly. "I'm reviving it. Patterson Construction will rise again, and I want you to run it, Marcus. Dad always said you had the best hands in the family, that you understood building in a way he never did. He'd want you to have it." Marcus sank back onto the couch, overwhelmed. "After what I did, how I betrayed you for cars that didn't even exist." "That's another thing," I said. "I've tracked down Dad's car collection. Richard sold them to private collectors, but most are willing to sell back. Your Christmas present is getting to restore them, just like you and Dad always planned." The room was crying now, everyone in tears as the magnitude of both Richard's evil and my father's love became clear. "Should we watch Dad's videos?" Mom asked hesitantly. I shook my head. "Not yet. Today is for us for being together. The videos will be there when we're ready, but there's one more recording I want to share." I pulled up the final file on the USB drive. This wasn't Richard's voice, but my father's, weak but determined. "Testing. Okay, it's recording. If someone finds this, please give it to my family. My name is Bill Patterson, and I'm being murdered by Richard Winters. He's poisoning me, making my death look like cancer complications. I can't prove it, yet can't go to the police because he's threatened my family, but I want the truth known. Richard, if you're listening to this someday from a prison cell, know that you failed. You tried to destroy my family, but you only made them stronger. Alexandra found the evidence. Helen survived your manipulation. Marcus became the man I always knew he could be. You thought revenge would heal your pain over Margaret, but all you did was multiply suffering. I forgive you, Richard. Not for your sake, but for my family's. They don't need to carry hatred. They need to heal, to love, to move forward. That's the best revenge against someone like you living well, despite your efforts to destroy us. To my family, remember this, we're Pattersons. We build things. Richard tried to tear us down, but we'll build back better. I love you all. Merry Christmas. The recording ended with a soft click. For a moment, no one moved. Then Mom walked to the mantel where Dad's picture sat and touched it gently. He protected us even while dying, she said softly. Even while being murdered, he was thinking of us. That's who he was, I said, and it's who we are. Protectors, builders, family. Grandma Dorothy struggled to her feet. I motion that we take a new vote. All in favor of Alexandra being fully welcomed back into this family, say I. The A's were unanimous, tearful, and immediate. And I motion, Aunt Marie added, that we never again let an outsider divide us, that we trust each other first always. Another unanimous vote. Marcus cleared his throat. I have something to say. Alex, you saved us, not just from Richard, but from ourselves, from what we were becoming under his influence. You took a bullet for Mom. You gave up your own family to find the truth. You're using Dad's trust to rebuild instead of punish. You're the best of us, and I'm proud to be your brother. We all are, Sarah added, reaching for my hand. Proud to be your family. As we moved toward the dining room for Christmas dinner, the first without Richard's poisonous presence, I felt something shift in the air. The shadow he'd cast was lifting. We were damaged, but not broken, hurt, but not destroyed. At the table, Mom had set Dad's place like always. His chair sat empty, but somehow full of presence. As we joined hands to say grace, I felt him there with us, his plan complete, his family safe. Thank you, Mom began the prayer, for truth revealed, for justice served, for family reunited. Thank you for Bill's wisdom and protection. Thank you for Alexandra's courage. Thank you for second chances. Amen, we chorused. As we began passing dishes, conversation slowly returning to normal, I caught Janet's eye. She nodded slightly, acknowledging what we'd accomplished. Richard had spent years planning our destruction, but he'd underestimated the power of truth, love, and a father's determination to protect his family from beyond the grave. Outside, snow began to fall, blanketing the world in pristine white. Inside, the Patterson family began the slow, necessary work of healing. Richard was gone, his true nature exposed, his victims saved. We'd survived. More than that, we'd won. The days between Christmas and New Year's blurred together in a whirlwind of legal meetings, FBI interviews, and family reconstruction. I temporarily moved back into my childhood home to help Mom adjust to life without Richard's controlling presence. The house felt different, now lighter, as if his removal had literally lifted a weight from the walls. Agent Chen had become a regular visitor, building her case with meticulous care. On December 28th, she arrived with a team of forensic accountants and boxes of evidence seized from Richard's various properties. We need your help identifying some transactions, she explained, spreading financial documents across the dining room table. Your father's business records are incredibly detailed, but Richard's are deliberately obscured. I sat beside her mom on my other side as we traced the web of Richard's deceptions. Every document revealed new depths of his criminality. This transfer here, Agent Chen pointed to a bank statement. $50,000 from Stronghold Construction to an offshore account. Can you identify the date? My size. Mom leaned forward. September 15th, 2016. That was the day Bill won the Riverside Hospital contract. Richard came home furious that night. He said Stronghold had been cheated. Because he'd sold the bid information to your husband, Agent Chen noted, but Bill outbid them anyway. Jianbrib Bill always added a 10% cushion to important bids, Mom said softly. He called it his insurance policy. Richard must have been livid when his betrayal didn't even work. My phone buzzed with texts from the family support group I'd created. Sarah was updating everyone on the FBI's visit to her house, where they'd found evidence of Richard's manipulation of Tom's gambling addiction. The messages showed Richard posing as different people luring Tom back to the tables whenever he tried to quit. Alexandra, Agent Chen said, pulling my attention back. We found something significant. Richard maintained detailed psychological profiles on each family member. Would you be willing to review them? It might be disturbing, but it could help us understand his methods. I nodded, though my stomach clenched. Agent Chen produced a tablet with scanned documents, Richard's handwritten notes about our family. The entry about me was chilling in its clinical detail. Alexandra Patterson. Primary obstacle. Strong-willed like father. Financially independent, harder to control. No vices to exploit, doesn't drink excessively, no drugs. No gambling. Close to father, likely to investigate his death. Solution. Isolate from family, make them see her success as arrogance. Backup plan. Physical elimination if necessary. He was planning to kill me, I said quietly. We found the contract, Agent Chen confirmed. Hired through intermediaries, payment scheduled for December 26th. Your father's security measures saved your life. Mom's entry was equally disturbing. Helen Patterson, primary target. Vulnerable from grief. Trusting nature. Desperate for companionship. Easy to medicate without suspicion. Access to all family assets. Solution. Love bombing, gradual sedation, financial control. Mom covered her face. He studied me like I was an experiment. Every kind word, every gesture of love, all calculated. Marcus arrived as we were reviewing his profile. He read over my shoulder. Marcus Patterson, useful pawn. Inferior complex regarding sister. Materialistic tendencies. Easily manipulated through promises. Father's car collection is key motivator. Solution. Promise rewards for loyalty, feed resentment toward Alexandra. He saw right through me, Marcus said bitterly. Knew exactly which strings to pull. He was a professional manipulator, Agent Chen reminded us. You weren't equipped to defend against someone like this. Few people are. The doorbell rang, interrupting our dark review. I found Patricia Coleman on the doorstep, Richard's wife from Michigan. She looked exhausted, her 6-year-old daughter Emma clinging to her hand. I'm sorry to just show up, she began, but I needed to meet you, to understand. I invited them in my heart, aching for this woman whose life had been shattered. Emma immediately gravitated toward our Christmas tree still up, despite the holiday being past. She doesn't understand why Daddy can't come home, Patricia whispered. How do I explain that her father is a monster? We gathered in the living room, Agent Chen excusing herself to make calls. Patricia's story unfolded 8 years of marriage to a man who traveled constantly for medical sales. A devoted father when present, a generous provider, a loving husband. Were there signs, she asked desperately, things I should have seen? Janet, who'd been quietly observing, spoke up. I've been investigating him for years and barely scratched the surface. He was that good at deception. But the other families, Patricia continued. Linda in Riverside, you here. How did he keep us all straight? How did he maintain 3 separate lives? I showed her the planning documents we'd found, calendars, schedules, elaborate lies to explain absences. Richard had treated his multiple families like a business with spreadsheets, tracking birthdays, anniversaries, cover stories. He even had scripts, I said, showing her a notebook. Conversations planned in advance, responses to likely questions. We weren't people to him. We were roles in his performance. Emma wandered over, clutching a glass ornament. "Is this your daddy?" she asked, pointing at my father's photo on the mantel. "Yes, sweetheart." "My daddy said bad things about your daddy. I heard him on the phone, but he said your daddy was mean. Was he mean?" The innocence of the question broke my heart. "No, Emma, my daddy was kind. Sometimes people lie about others." "Like daddy lied about his name." Patricia pulled Emma close. "Yes, baby, like that." My phone rang. Morrison, the family lawyer. "Alexandra, I have news. The insurance companies are expediting payment on your father's policies. Given the evidence of murder, they're treating it as a wrongful death claim. The payout will be substantial." "How substantial?" 3 million separate from the trust assets. Your father had multiple policies Richard didn't know about. I looked at Patricia holding her daughter, at my mother still processing her husband's betrayal. "Mr. Morrison, can trust funds be used to help other victims of crimes? As trustee, you have broad discretionary powers for charitable purposes." After I hung up, I turned to Patricia. "I want to help. Richard stole years of your life. Emma deserves security. We can't accept. It's not charity, it's justice. Richard stole from all of us. My father would want his resources used to help his victims." Agent Chen returned as Patricia was crying with relief. "I have updates. We've linked Richard to 12 murders across 20 years. The prosecutors are seeking life without parole. Also, Linda Summers wants to meet with both of you. She's flying in tomorrow." The next morning, our support group expanded. Linda arrived with her teenage sons, Kyle and Jason. Unlike Patricia's shock, Linda radiated anger. 12 years of lies," she spat. 12 years of thinking I had a devoted husband who just traveled for work. My boys grew up with a serial killer for a father." Kyle, 17, and trying to look tough, spoke up. Was he violent with any of you?" "Yeah, psychologically violent," I answered carefully. "Physical violence would have left evidence. Richard was too smart for that." "He hit Mom once," Jason, 15, admitted quietly. When she questioned why he had 2 phones, said she was being paranoid. Linda's face darkened. "He convinced me I'd imagined it. Said I was stressed from work, seeing things that weren't there." The pattern was sickeningly familiar. Gaslighting, manipulation, controlled violence only when necessary. We spent hours comparing experiences, finding the commonalities in his deceptions. "He had a type," Janet observed. "Women who were either grieving or isolated. Families with assets he could access. Children he could use as leverage." "Are we his only families?" Patricia asked. "Or are there more?" Agent Chen checked her notes. "We're investigating leads in 3 other states. His pattern suggests there could be more victims." The task force had set up a tip line and calls were pouring in. Women who dated someone matching Richard's description. Businesses that had been defrauded. Families with suspicious deaths. "He's like a virus," Mom said quietly, "spreading destruction wherever he went." Marcus had been quiet throughout the meeting. Finally, he spoke. "I've been thinking about something. Richard chose us, specifically planned for years. But what if we choose each other? What if we become the family he tried to prevent?" "What do you mean?" Linda asked. "He isolated each family unit, kept us secret from each other, but we're all victims of the same man. Emma, Kyle, Jason. They're Richard's children, but they're also innocents in this. What if we don't let him divide us anymore?" It was a radical thought. 3 families bound by deception, choosing connection over isolation. "Like a survivor's network," Sarah suggested, "supporting each other through the legal process and beyond." "The boys need positive male influences," Linda admitted. "Their father figure turned out to be a killer." "I could help with that," Marcus offered. "I know what it's like to be manipulated by him. Maybe I can help them process it." Over the following days, an unlikely alliance formed. Patricia and her daughter moved into a rental property near us while dealing with legal matters. Linda's family stayed at a local extended stay hotel. We met daily, sharing meals and stories, building something real from Richard's lies. The FBI's case grew stronger with each passing day. They'd found where Richard had hidden bodies, 2 in Michigan, 1 in California. Cold cases were being reopened. Families were getting answers about long missing relatives. He won't plead guilty. Agent Chen warned us during one visit. He's maintaining his innocence, claiming it's all a conspiracy. He's hired a team of defense lawyers. Let him, I said firmly. We have Dad's evidence, the recordings, the financial trails. Truth is stronger than his lies. The trial will be brutal, she cautioned. He'll try to destroy all of you on the stand. That's his only strategy, make the victims look unreliable. Then we'd better be ready, Mom said with new steel in her voice. He's taken enough from us. He won't take our truth. That night, I found Emma in the backyard looking up at the stars. And Alex, she'd started calling me that. Do you think Daddy loved us at all, or were we just pretend? How do you answer that question for a 6-year-old? I think people like your daddy don't love the way healthy people do, but that doesn't mean you aren't lovable. You're wonderful, Emma. What he was had nothing to do with who you are. Kyle says we have bad blood, that we'll be like Daddy. Kyle's wrong. You choose who you become, Emma, and you have lots of people now who'll help you choose well. She slipped her small hand into mine. I'm glad he can't hurt anybody else. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. As December ended and a new year beckoned, I looked at the strange, extended family Richard had inadvertently created. 3 women who'd loved a lie, children who'd lost a father who never existed, siblings bound by betrayal and healing. He'd meant to destroy us all. Instead, he'd forged us into something stronger, a testament to resilience, truth, and the family you choose. The case was building, justice was coming, and we were ready. January 2nd arrived with an unexpected phone call. Richard wanted to meet with me. His lawyer, a shark named Vincent Carlisle, who specialized in defending the indefensible, claimed his client had information that would change everything. Absolutely not, Agent Chen said when I told her. It's a manipulation tactic. He's trying to regain control. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to face him, not for closure that would come with his conviction, but to show him he'd failed. I'll go with her, Mom announced, surprising everyone. We were gathered in the living room, our extended survivor family discussing the request. Helen, no, Janet protested. You don't need to subject yourself to that. Yes, I do, Mom said firmly. For 5 years, he controlled me with drugs and lies. I need him to see me clear-eyed. I need to face him as myself, not the sedated puppet he created. Linda and Patricia exchanged glances. We want to go too, Linda said. All of us. Let him see the families he destroyed standing together. Agent Chen sighed. If you're determined to do this, we'll need strict security protocols, and I'll be present for everything. 3 days later, we walked into the federal detention center. Richard's 3 families united in purpose. Emma stayed with a babysitter, but Kyle and Jason had insisted on coming. We're old enough to face him, Kyle had argued. We need to see who he really is. The meeting room was sterile and cold with bulletproof glass dividing visitors from inmates. We arranged ourselves in a line, 3 women he'd married, children he'd fathered, and me, the daughter who'd exposed him. When they brought Richard in, I barely recognized him. Gone was the confident manipulator. His hair had grayed seemingly overnight. Orange jumpsuit replaced his expensive suits, but his eyes still held that calculating gleam. He sat down, scanning our faces with what looked like amusement. My, all my families together. How cozy. We're not your families, Linda said sharply. We never were. We were victims of your con. Richard's gaze settled on me. Alexandra, you look well for someone who was shot. I heard my aim was off. Your aim's been off for years, I replied evenly. You missed everything that actually mattered. He leaned forward. Did I? I had 20 years of success. 20 years of taking what I wanted, being who I wanted. How many people can say that? Success! Patricia's voice shook with anger. You call murdering people success, destroying families, lying to your own children. Lying is such a harsh word. I prefer creating narratives. And they were good narratives, weren't they? You all believed them completely. Jason suddenly stood. Did you ever feel anything when you tucked us in at night when you came to our games? Was any of it real? For just a moment, something flickered across Richard's face, then the mask slammed back down. Real is relative, son. I was real in those moments. Don't call me son, Jason said quietly. I'm not your son. I'm just another person you fooled. Richard's attention swiveled to my mother. Hello, Helen. You look awake. I suppose they've weaned you off the medications. The drugs you were poisoning me with, Mom corrected. Just like you poisoned Bill. Your husband was dying anyway. I simply hastened the inevitable. The casual admission sent a ripple of fury through our group. Agent Chen leaned forward, undoubtedly noting every word for the prosecution. Why? Mom's voice was steady. Why target us? Why Bill? Richard's facade cracked slightly. Your precious Bill destroyed everything I'd built. Margaret is dead because of him. Margaret died because you involved her in embezzlement, I interjected. Because you killed her when she became a liability. Prove it, he snarled, then caught himself smoothing his features. Though, I suppose you think you can prove everything now, don't you? With Bill's little treasure trove of evidence. We can and we will, I said. 12 murders, Richard. Possibly more. You're never getting out. Perhaps not, he mused, but I've had a good run, and I've left my mark on all of you. Every time you trust someone new, you'll wonder. Every relationship will be tainted with doubt. I've changed you all forever. You're right, Patricia said unexpectedly. You have changed us. You taught us to recognize evil, to trust our instincts, to protect each other. You created the very family you tried to prevent, one bound by survival and truth instead of lies. Kyle spoke for the first time. We know who you are now. Ronald Fitzgerald, who killed his first wife and ran, who spent 20 years running and killing and lying. But we also know who we are. We're the ones who stopped you. Richard's composure finally cracked. You sanctimonious little... Careful, Agent Chen warned. Threatening minors won't help your case. What case? Richard laughed bitterly. We all know how this ends. Life without parole if I'm lucky. Death penalty if I'm not. The great Richard Winters reduced to a number in a federal prison. You did it to yourself, Linda said. Every choice, every lie, every murder. You had so many chances to stop, to be better. You chose this. Speaking of choices, Richard said, his voice taking on a sly tone, there are things you still don't know. Things not in Bill's precious evidence. Such as, I kept my voice neutral, not wanting to give him the satisfaction of curiosity. Other families, other identities, you think you found them all? He smiled that cold manipulator's grin I'd learned to recognize. I've been at this for 20 years. You've scratched the surface. If there are other victims, we'll find them, Agent Chen stated. Your cooperation might help at sentencing. Cooperation. Richard laughed. Why would I cooperate to help the families I created and supported, to ease the conscience of women too stupid to see what was in front of them? That was too much for Marcus, who'd been silent until now. How dare you? You murdered our father. You destroyed our family. You're nothing but a parasite. A successful parasite, Richard countered. Your father knew what I was, and he still couldn't stop me. Even prepared, even suspicious, he died by my hand. What does that say about the great Bill Patterson? It says he was human, I replied. That he trusted too much, loved too deeply. That he believed even someone like you could be redeemed. His humanity wasn't weakness. It's what made him worth 10 of you. Pretty words. Richard sneered. "Did they comfort you while you were excluded from Christmas, while your family chose me over you?" "They chose your lies over truth," Mom interjected. "But truth won in the end. It always does." "Does it check your bank accounts lately? Helen, the offshore transfers I set up are still processing. Automated systems moving money you'll never recover. Even from here, I'm taking from you." Agent Chen made a note. "We'll trace every penny you've already lost, Richard. This is just posturing." "Is it?" He leaned back, studying us. "You came here for closure, for me to break down and apologize, show remorse. But I don't feel remorse. Every person I eliminated threatened my survival. Every family I created served a purpose. I'm not sorry for surviving." "You're not surviving," Jason said quietly. "You're alone. No one loves you. No one ever did. We loved a fiction. You'll die in prison knowing you were never real to anyone." That hit harder than any accusation. Richard's face contorted with rage before he forced it back to neutrality. "Guard," he called. "We're done here." As they prepared to take him away, he looked directly at me. "Your father begged you no. At the end, when he realized what was happening, begged me to spare you all. Pathetic." The lie was obvious. Dad would never have begged Richard for anything, but before any of us could respond, they'd hauled him away. We sat in stunned silence for a moment. Then Emma's future stepfather, Patricia, had recently started dating a kind teacher named David, spoke up. "He's trying to plant seeds of doubt. Don't let him." "He's terrified," Agent Chen observed. "That performance, that was fear. He knows the evidence is overwhelming. He's grasping for any control he can find." Outside the detention center, we gathered in the parking lot, processing what had just happened. "I thought I'd feel better," Linda admitted, "seeing him powerless, but I just feel empty." "Because closure doesn't come from him," Janet said wisely. "It comes from us, from choosing to heal despite him." Kyle and Jason were quiet, processing their biological father's complete lack of remorse. Marcus put a hand on each of their shoulders. "You know what he's wrong about leaving his mark on us. We get to choose what marks us, and I choose this standing together, facing truth, protecting each other. That's what defines us, not him." As we prepared to leave in separate cars, Mom called out, "Sunday dinner at my house. Everyone, we're starting a new tradition the family Richard tried to prevent." Agreement was unanimous. 3 families forged by deception choosing connection. That night, I found myself in Dad's old study, now my home office. The evidence boxes were stacked neatly, waiting for trial. Richard's words echoed other families, other identities. I called Agent Chen. He might have been bluffing about other victims, but we should check. "Already on it," she assured me. "We've got teams reviewing missing persons cases, suspicious deaths, financial fraud reports. If there are others, we'll find them. And if we do, then we help them too. That's what you've built here, Alexandra, a network of survivors. It can expand as needed." After hanging up, I looked at Dad's photo on the desk. "He's going away forever, Dad. He'll never hurt anyone again." I could almost hear my father's response. "Good. Now focus on the living. Build something beautiful from the ashes." That's exactly what we intended to do. Richard had created families built on lies. We were building one on truth. He'd isolated us to control us. We were uniting to heal. In trying to destroy the Patterson family, Richard had created something he never could have imagined, a chosen family of survivors who would ensure no one else fell victim to men like him. The confrontation was over. The healing could truly begin. The trial date was set for March 15th. As winter melted into spring, our strange extended family prepared for the legal battle ahead. The prosecution team, led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Mariah Rodriguez, met with us regularly to prepare testimony. "Richard's defense team is going to try to discredit each of you," Rodriguez explained during one session. "They'll claim conspiracy, shared delusion, anything to create reasonable doubt. We need to be ready." But we weren't prepared for Richard's first legal maneuver. On February 20th, Vincent Carlisle filed a motion claiming Richard was mentally incompetent to stand trial. The documents allege that Richard suffered from dissociative identity disorder, that his multiple identities weren't calculated deception, but genuine mental fractures. "It's bullshit," Agent Chen said bluntly when she brought us the news. "Every psychological evaluation shows he's completely competent. This is a delay tactic." Patricia laughed bitterly. "Multiple personalities. He kept spreadsheets of his lies. That's not mental illness, that's organized crime." The competency hearing was scheduled for March 1st. We all attended, watching as Richard's lawyers paraded expert witnesses who'd examined him for all of 2 hours each. But the prosecution was ready. Dr. Sarah Winters, no relation, despite the name, took the stand as the court-appointed psychiatric evaluator. She'd spent dozens of hours with Richard. "Mr. Winters, or Mr. Fitzgerald, shows no signs of dissociative disorders," she testified. "His multiple identities were carefully constructed and maintained with full awareness. He could recall details from each identity at will, showed no memory gaps, no confusion. This is antisocial personality disorder with psychopathic traits, not DID." The judge agreed. Richard was competent to stand trial. As they let him out, he caught my eye and smiled. The delay had only been 2 weeks, but it had served his purpose, reminding us he still had moves to play. March 15th arrived cold but clear. Media trucks lined the street outside the federal courthouse. The story of the bigamist killer had captured national attention. True crime podcasts dissected our family tragedy weekly. We'd had to hire security to keep reporters away from Emma's school. Inside the courthouse, we took our seats behind the prosecution. All 3 families united. Richard entered in a suit, his lawyers having successfully argued he should appear presentable to the jury. He looked like the successful businessman he'd pretended to be, not the killer he was. Maria Rodriguez's opening statement was masterful. She laid out 20 years of deception, theft, and murder with clinical precision. Financial records appeared on screens. Photos of victims filled the jury box with grief. My father's recorded words echoed through the courtroom. "Richard Winters built his life on the graves of those who discovered his truth," Rodriguez concluded. "Today, that truth will bury him instead." Carlisle's defense was predictable but polished. Richard wasn't a killer, but a troubled man whose childhood trauma led to elaborate fantasies. The deaths were unfortunate coincidences. The financial crimes were misunderstandings. Bill Patterson had been paranoid, seeing murder where there was only misfortune. "My client is guilty of bigamy, yes," Carlisle admitted, "of deception in his personal life, but not murder. The prosecution's case is built on the delusions of a dying man and the grief of families looking for someone to blame." Then came the witnesses. I testified, first walking through, finding the safety deposit box, the evidence my father had gathered. Carlisle tried to shake me on cross-examination. "Isn't it true you were estranged from your family when you found these documents?" "They voted to exclude me from Christmas based on Richard's lies, yes." "So you had motive to paint my client as a villain, to regain your family's affection?" "I had motive to find the truth. The evidence painted Richard as what he is." Mom testified next, describing the gradual drugging, the control, the fear. Her voice broke when she described finding out Richard had poisoned my father. "I slept next to his killer for 5 years, she said. I let him into our home, our lives, if I'd known." "You couldn't have known," Rodriguez said gently. "That's why predators like Richard are so dangerous." Linda and Patricia testified about their sham marriages, the lies, the gaslighting. Kyle and Jason bravely described their father's occasional mask slips, moments of coldness they'd tried to forget. But the most damaging testimony came from unexpected sources. Margaret Winters' sister had flown in from Maine. She testified about her sister's fear in the days before her death, the bruises she'd tried to hide her plan to leave Richard, and testify about the embezzlement. "She called me the night she died," the sister said through tears. "Said if anything happened to her, Richard did it. I thought she was being dramatic. I should have listened." Dr. Morrison, my father's oncologist, took the stand under immunity agreement. He detailed Richard's blackmail, the medication switches, his own crushing guilt. "Bill Patterson was responding well to treatment," he testified. "The heart failure was induced by drug interactions Richard orchestrated. I'll carry that guilt forever." The forensic accountant walked the jury through Richard's financial web. 12 identities, millions stolen money hidden in dozens of accounts. The sheer scope overwhelmed even those of us who'd lived it. Then came Richard's former cellmate who'd cut a deal with prosecutors. Richard had bragged about his crimes, thinking attorney-client privilege covered jailhouse confessions. He said killing was easy once you understood people's weaknesses, the cellmate testified. Said he'd studied each victim for months, found their vulnerable spots, called it pressure point elimination. On day 7, the prosecution played my father's recordings. His voice filled the courtroom, weak but determined, documenting his own murder. Several jurors wept openly. Richard's defense was weak. Character witnesses who'd known one identity or another, unaware of the others. Experts who tried to explain away forensic evidence. Carlyle fought valiantly, but the evidence mountain was insurmountable. Richard took the stand on day 10. He wore a sweater vest, looking like a grandfather, not a serial killer. Carlyle walked him through a sob story: abusive childhood, desperate circumstances, good intentions gone wrong. Then Rodriguez began her cross. "Mr. Winters, or do you prefer Fitzgerald?" Thence. "Winters is fine." "How about Summers?" "That's what Linda knew you as." "Or Winters singular." "That's Patricia's name for you." "I had different names for different circumstances. Different wives, too. Different children. Different lives. Tell me, when you were tucking Emma into bed in Michigan, did you think about Kyle and Jason in California? When you were having Sunday dinner with the Pattersons, did you remember your promise to have dinner with Linda?" "I compartmentalized. It was necessary." "Necessary, like killing Margaret was necessary." "I didn't kill Margaret." Rodriguez pulled up a document. "This is the police report from Margaret's accident. The brake line was cut. You were a mechanic before you met her, weren't you?" "Lots of people know about cars." "But not lots of people benefited from her death. You inherited her life insurance, used it to create your first false identity." The cross-examination lasted hours. Rodriguez dismantled every lie, exposed every contradiction. By the end, Richard's mask had slipped entirely. The jury saw him exposed, cold, calculating, remorseless. In his closing, Carlyle made one last attempt, painting Richard as a man who'd lost his way, not a monster. But Rodriguez's closing was devastating. She stood before the jury with photos of all Richard's victims. 23 people. That's how many lives Richard Winters destroyed or ended. Men, women, children left fatherless. Families shattered. 20 years of calculated evil. Today, you can stop him. Today, you can give these families justice. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours. On the charge of murder in the first degree of William Patterson, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of murder in the first degree of Margaret Winters, we find the defendant guilty. 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 12 murder convictions. 27 counts of fraud. 3 counts of bigamy. The list went on. Richard stood stoically as verdict after verdict was read. But when they reached the attempted murder charge, shooting me, he finally reacted. "Oh, guilty." His shoulders sagged, the last pretense of control shattered. Judge Harrison scheduled sentencing for the following month. As court adjourned, Richard was led away in shackles. He looked back once, scanning our faces. I saw him mouth something that might have been, "I'm sorry," or might have been, "I won." Outside, the media frenzy erupted. Rodriguez gave a brief statement about justice being served. We slipped out a side entrance gathering at a nearby restaurant to process what had happened. "It's over," Mom said, disbelief coloring her voice. "It's really over." "The criminal part," I corrected gently. "Now we rebuild." Emma, who'd been staying with David during the trial, ran to Patricia. "Did the judge say Daddy can't hurt people anymore?" "Yes, sweetheart. He can never hurt anyone again." "Good," Emma said firmly. "Now, can we have ice cream?" The simple request broke our tension. We laughed, ordered ice cream for everyone, and began the transition from victims to survivors. A month later, we returned for sentencing. Richard had aged years. In weeks, his hair now fully gray. Judge Harrison didn't mince words. "Richard Winters, Ronald Fitzgerald, whatever name you choose, you are a predator who destroyed lives for sport and profit. You showed no mercy to your victims. This court shows none to you." 12 consecutive life sentences, no possibility of parole, additional centuries for the financial crimes. Richard would die in federal prison alone and forgotten, except by those he'd tried to destroy. As they led him away for the last time, our extended family stood together. 3 women who loved an illusion, children robbed of a real father, siblings forged by survival. "What now?" Linda asked as we left the courthouse. "Now we live," I said. "We build the lives he tried to steal. We love the people he tried to isolate. We thrive because that's the best revenge." That night, I found myself in Dad's study again. The evidence boxes were gone, shipped to federal storage. The room felt lighter, freed from the weight of secrets. "We did it, Dad," I whispered to his photo. "Richard's gone. The family's safe. Your plan worked." Outside, spring flowers bloomed in the garden Mom was finally tending again. Marcus was teaching Kyle to restore cars in the garage. Patricia and David were planning a real wedding with Emma as flower girl. Linda had started dating a kind man who knew her whole story and loved her anyway. And me, I was using the trust funds to create a foundation for families affected by long-term deception and fraud. The Patterson Foundation would help others like us, people whose lives were shattered by master manipulators. Richard had spent 20 years building elaborate lies. We'd spend the rest of our lives building elaborate truths. He'd tried to destroy us with isolation. We'd overcome him with connection. The law had struck. Justice was served. Now came the harder part, learning to trust again, to love without fear, to build families on foundations of truth instead of lies. But we'd do it together. The family Richard tried to prevent had become the family that prevented others like him. And somewhere, I knew Dad was proud. 6 months after Richard's sentencing, our lives had settled into something resembling normal. The media attention had finally died down, though occasionally a true crime show would reach out for interviews. We always declined. We'd said everything we needed to say in court. The Patterson Foundation was officially incorporated, with offices in the building that once housed Dad's construction company. Marcus had revived Patterson Construction, starting small with residential renovations. 3 of Dad's former employees had returned loyal even after everything. On a warm September morning, I stood in the Foundation's conference room preparing for our first major meeting. Representatives from 5 families were coming, all victims of long-term deception who'd reached out after hearing our story. "You ready for this?" Sarah asked, setting up chairs. She'd left her marketing job to become the Foundation's program director. Tom was 6 months sober, their marriage stronger, for having survived Richard's manipulation. "As ready as anyone can be," I admitted. "It's strange being on the other side, being the one offering help instead of desperately needing it." The families arrived gradually. A woman whose husband had lived a double life for 15 years. A man whose business partner had embezzled while maintaining a brotherly friendship. Adult children discovering their parents' entire identity was fabricated, each story unique but bound by the common thread of betrayal. "Welcome." I began looking at faces that showed the same shell-shocked expression I'd worn months ago. We know why you're here. We know the questions keeping you up at night. How did I not see it? How much was real? How do I trust again? Patricia stood to share her journey. 8 months ago, I discovered my husband was a serial killer with 2 other families. Today, I'm engaged to a wonderful man who knows every detail of my past. Healing isn't linear, but it's possible. Linda talked about helping her sons process their father's crimes. They struggled with the fear of bad blood of becoming him. We found therapists who specialize in children of criminals. Kyle's applying to colleges now. Jason's in therapy, but thriving. They chose their own path. The meeting lasted 3 hours. We shared resources, therapist recommendations, legal contacts, but mostly we shared the understanding that comes from survival. The hardest part, one woman said, is that I still have good memories. How do I reconcile loving someone who never existed? Mom fielded that one. The emotions were real, even if the person wasn't. I loved the man Richard pretended to be. That love wasn't wasted. It showed my capacity for trust and connection. Richard's lies don't diminish my truth. After the meeting, I found myself in Dad's old office, now mine. The walls held photos of our extended family, all of Richard's victims who'd become our chosen tribe. Emma's school pictures sat next to Kyle's graduation photo and Jason's artwork. My phone rang, Agent Chen with an update. We've identified 2 more families, she said. 1 in Texas, 1 in Oregon. Both women want to connect with your group. Send them our information. We'll help however we can. There's something else. Richard's been diagnosed with terminal liver cancer, 6 months, maybe less. I sat with that information, waiting for some emotional response. Satisfaction, sadness. But I felt nothing. Does he want to see anyone? He's requested you specifically, says he has information about more victims. Of course he does. Richard's final manipulation dangling the possibility of closure for others. I'll think about it. That evening, our extended family gathered for Sunday dinner, a tradition Mom had insisted on. The dining room table had been expanded twice to accommodate everyone. David helped Mom in the kitchen while Patricia corralled Emma. Linda's boyfriend Robert discussed baseball with Kyle and Jason. Marcus and his new girlfriend Amy, who knew our whole story and chose to stay anyway, set the table. I have news, I announced during dessert. Richard's dying. Cancer. He wants to see me. The table erupted in opinions. Don't go. Let him rot. Maybe he really has information. It's another trick. What do you want to do? Mom asked quietly. I don't know. Part of me never wants to see him again. Part of me wonders if he really knows about other victims. I'll go with you, Marcus offered immediately. You don't have to face him alone. We all will, Sarah added, if you decide to go. I looked around the table at these people, bound by trauma but choosing love. Richard's legacy should have been destruction. Instead, it was this connection, support, resilience. I need to think, I said, but thank you, all of you. Later, as everyone helped clean up, Emma tugged on my sleeve. Aunt Alex, are you scared of him? Of Daddy? I knelt to her level. No, sweetheart, he has no power over us anymore. Then why is everyone upset about you seeing him? Because sometimes staying away from people who hurt us is how we protect ourselves. Emma considered this. But you're strong. You caught him. You protected everyone. Being strong doesn't mean we have to face everything, Emma. Sometimes the strongest thing is knowing when to walk away. She hugged me tight. Whatever you decide, we'll still have Sunday dinners, right? Always, I promised. The next week was a whirlwind of foundation work. We'd received a major grant from a nonprofit supporting crime victims. Marcus landed his first commercial renovation contract. Mom started volunteering with a grief support group, the same one where she'd met Richard, now reformed with better screening procedures. I'd almost decided not to see Richard when another call came, this time from Vincent Carlisle, his former attorney. Ms. Patterson, I'm calling as a courtesy. Richard gave me a sealed letter months ago with instructions to deliver it if he became terminally ill. I'm obligated to inform you it exists. You're still representing him. No, this is strictly executing previous instructions. The letter is yours if you want it. Curiosity 1. I met Carlyle at a coffee shop where he handed me a thick envelope. For what it's worth, he said as he left, I've defended many criminals. Your father's recordings haunted me. What Richard did to your family. I'm glad justice was served. I waited until I was home to open the letter. Richard's precise handwriting filled pages. Alexandra. By now you know I'm dying. Fitting, isn't it? The cancer consuming me like I consumed others. I won't waste time with apologies you wouldn't believe anyway. You want to know about other victims. There were 7 more. Names. Dates, locations enclosed. Most are dead, I was thorough, but their families deserve to know. You asked once why I targeted your father. The truth is simpler than my elaborate revenge story. Bill Patterson was a good man with a successful business and a trusting nature, that's all. No grand vendetta over Margaret, just opportunity. I picked your mother because she was lonely and wealthy. I could have chosen any grieving widow. Helen was simply convenient. Does that hurt more or less than believing it was personal? I've watched you build your foundation, create your chosen family. You've made something beautiful from my ugliness. I'd claim credit, say I made you stronger, but that would be another lie. You were always strong. I just revealed it. The cancer is painful. I'm refusing treatment. Consider it my gift to you, dying slowly, alone, afraid. The death I gave others came quickly. Mine stretches with each agonizing day. I won't ask for forgiveness. We both know I don't deserve it. But I'll offer you truth, the only currency I have left. Your father knew he was dying from the first dose. He chose to spend his remaining time gathering evidence instead of fighting back. He traded his life for your family's safety. Make sure that sacrifice meant something. Richard Winters, Ronald Fitzgerald, whatever name fits the dying man I've become. Attached were pages of details about victims I'd never heard of, a college student who'd discovered Richard's identity theft, a coworker who'd questioned inconsistencies, a neighbor who'd seen too much, all dead in accidents or suicides. I shared the information with Agent Chen, who opened new investigations. More families would get answers. More graves would get justice. Are you going to see him? Mom asked that evening. No, I decided. He gave me what mattered, the names of other victims. I don't need to watch him die to know we've won. 2 months later, Richard died alone in the prison medical ward. No visitors, no mourners, no legacy except the families he'd created through deception who'd found truth together. We held a memorial that day, not for him, but for all his victims. Dad's picture sat prominently among them. We shared stories, lit candles, and made promises to keep building the lives Richard had tried to steal. He wanted to be remembered, I said while addressing our extended family. He will be as a cautionary tale, as the reason we check references, trust our instincts, and protect each other. His legacy isn't destruction. It's us united and thriving despite him. That night, I updated the foundation website with resources for the newly discovered victims. Marcus called to say Patterson Construction had hired 2 more employees. Mom texted that her grief support group wanted foundation pamphlets. Life continued. Not the life we'd planned before Richard's interference, but perhaps a richer one. We'd been tested by the worst humanity could offer and responded with the best connection, compassion, resilience. In trying to destroy us, Richard had forged us into something unbreakable, a family not of blood but of choice, survivors who became thrivers, victims who became advocates. His death meant nothing. Our lives meant everything. 1 year later, December 24th arrived with a gentle snowfall that made the world look clean and new. The Patterson family home glowed with warmth, every window bright with Christmas lights. Marcus and Kyle had spent the afternoon installing. I stood in the kitchen, helping Mom prepare Christmas Eve dinner, a tradition we'd reclaimed and expanded. The counter overflowed with dishes representing all our backgrounds: Linda's Swedish meatballs, Patricia's Polish pierogi, Janet's famous dim sum, and Mom's traditional turkey. "Remember last Christmas?" Mom asked, her hand steady as she seasoned the roast. I could barely function. Richard had me so drugged I thought the walls were melting. And now, I prompted, though I knew the answer. The transformation had been remarkable. Now I'm hosting 17 people for dinner, running the grief support group, and dating someone new. She blushed at the last admission. Dr. Peter Morrison, not the oncologist, but a veterinarian she'd met, volunteering at the animal shelter, had been gently courting her for months. "Dad would approve," I assured her. "Peter's a good man who knows our whole story and isn't scared by it." "Bill would want me happy," she agreed. It took me a year to believe I deserved happiness after letting Richard into our lives. "You didn't let him in, Mom. He forced his way in through lies and manipulation. There's a difference." The doorbell rang, and soon the house filled with our chosen family. Linda arrived with Robert, and the boys, Kyle, now sporting a college freshman's confidence, Jason carrying a portfolio of art he'd created for the foundation's new brochure. Patricia, David, and Emma came next, Emma wearing a Christmas dress she'd picked out herself, her face glowing with the security of a stable home. "Aunt Alex," Emma ran to me. "David asked Mommy to marry him for real with a ring and everything. I get to be the flower girl again, but this time, it's not pretend." I hugged her tight, meeting Patricia's tearful smile over her head. "That's wonderful news, sweetheart." Sarah and Tom arrived with their twin daughters born 6 months ago, their miracle babies, after years of trying, conceived once the stress of Richard's manipulation finally lifted. Janet brought her partner of 30 years, finally comfortable enough to bring her whole self to family gatherings. Even Agent Chen joined us, having become a friend through the long months of trials and investigations. She brought news that the last of Richard's victims had been identified and their families notified. As we gathered around the extended dining table, I thought about the empty chair we'd retired. Not Dad's, his memory was honored and celebrated, but the chair Richard had claimed the spot from which he'd held court and spun his lies. That chair was gone, burned in a cleansing bonfire we'd held on the anniversary of his arrest. Before we eat, Mom stood raising her glass of cider. "I want to say something. A year ago, we were broken, scattered. Some of us didn't even know the others existed. Richard tried to destroy us with isolation and lies." She paused, looking at each face. "But look at us now. 3 families became one. Strangers became siblings. We chose each other, chose love over fear, truth over deception. We're not just survivors. We're a testament to the power of human connection." "To family." Marcus added his arm around Amy's engagement ring sparkling on her finger. "The kind you're born into, and the kind you choose." "To Dad," I said, "who protected us even in death. And to all Richard's victims who deserved better." "To second chances," Patricia contributed, David squeezing her hand. "To truth," Linda said firmly. "And this to us," little Emma declared, making everyone laugh. We toasted and began passing dishes, the table alive with conversation. Kyle talked about his engineering program inspired by my father's legacy. Jason showed his portfolio to anyone who'd look his artistic talent blossoming in safety. The twins gurgled happily in their high chairs, while Tom, sober for 18 months, now made them laugh. "Alexandra," Peter caught my attention. "Your mother tells me that the foundation just got approved for federal nonprofit status." "Finally," I confirmed. "It means we can expand nationally. We've had inquiries from families across the country. Long-term deception is more common than people think." "You've built something amazing," Janet observed. Bill would be so proud. From the ashes of Richard's evil came this light. After dinner, we gathered in the living room for our new tradition. Each person shared one way they'd grown in the past year. I learned to trust again, Patricia said simply. I stopped hating myself for being fooled, Linda added. I discovered I'm stronger than I knew, Mom contributed. I learned that family isn't about blood. Kyle said it's about showing up. When my turn came, I looked at these faces I'd come to love so deeply. I learned that the best revenge isn't punishment. It's living well. It's taking what someone meant for evil and transforming it into good. Oh, speaking of transformation, Marcus stood pulling out a restored keyring. I finished the last car from Dad's collection yesterday. The '67 Mustang is ready whenever you want to take her for a spin, Alex. Tears pricked my eyes. The car Dad and I had planned to restore together, the one Richard had sold to hurt us, recovered and rebuilt by my brother's loving hands. Thank you, I managed. Dad would love that you brought her home. As the evening progressed, the Foundation's mission crystallized in my mind. We'd received a major grant proposal that would let us create a residential program for families recovering from long-term deception. A place where they could heal together like we had. I have an announcement, I said during dessert. If the grant comes through, we're buying the old Mitchell estate, turning it into a healing center where families can stay while rebuilding their lives. The place with the gardens and the lake, Sarah asked excitedly. That's perfect. 15 bedrooms, common areas, therapy spaces. We could host workshops, support groups, legal clinics, everything we wished we'd had when our world exploded. The room buzzed with excitement and ideas. This was Richard's true defeat, not just his imprisonment, but our refusal to let his darkness define us. We'd taken his ashes and grown a garden. As midnight approached, we exchanged gifts. Not expensive things, but meaningful ones. Handmade scarves from Linda, who'd taken up knitting for stress relief. Jason's portraits of each family member. A photo album Sarah had compiled of our year of healing. Emma fell asleep on the couch, clutching a stuffed animal. David carried her to the guest room while Patricia helped Mom clean up. The evening wound down naturally, people departing with long hugs and promises to see each other soon. Marcus was the last to leave. You know what's funny, he said, pausing at the door. Richard thought excluding you from Christmas would destroy our family. Instead, it saved us. If he hadn't overplayed his hand, we might never have discovered the truth. Dad always said good could come from anything if you looked hard enough, I replied. Think he knew that would include Richard. I think Dad knew that especially included Richard. Why else prepare so thoroughly for something he hoped would never happen? After everyone left, I stood in the quiet house. The Christmas tree twinkled softly underneath. It presents for tomorrow, when everyone would return for Christmas dinner. The mantle held photos of our extended family, Richard's victims turned victors. I picked up Dad's picture, his smile forever frozen in happiness. We did it, Dad. We rebuilt. We're helping others rebuild. Your sacrifice meant everything. A text lit up my phone. Emma, who'd apparently woken up in the car. Merry Christmas, Aunt Alex. Thank you for cathing the bad man and keeping us safe. Love you. I smiled, typing back, Love you too, sweetheart. Merry Christmas. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in fresh possibility. Somewhere families were discovering deception, feeling their worlds crumble. Tomorrow, they'd find our website, our resources, our story of hope. Richard had created his own defeat. In trying to destroy one family, he'd created a movement. In attempting to silence truth, he'd amplified it. In choosing isolation as a weapon, he'd forged connections that would ripple out to help countless others. The clock struck midnight, Christmas Day. A year ago, I'd been banned from this celebration. Now I stood at the heart of a family that chose each other daily, that built beauty from brokenness. I raised my mug of cocoa to the window, to the snow, to the future we were building. Merry Christmas, Richard, I whispered. Thank you for failing so spectacularly. Thank you for showing us exactly who we are, fighters, survivors, family. The Patterson Foundation's website received 3 new inquiries that night, 3 more families seeking hope after deception, 3 more chances to transform pain into purpose. We were ready for them. We were ready for anything. Because Richard had taught us the most valuable lesson of all. When someone tries to destroy you with lies, you respond with truth. When they wound with isolation, you heal with connection. When they intend evil, you choose good. And you never ever give up on family, the one you're born into, or the one you build from the ashes of what tried to burn you down. Dear reader, if you've stayed with us through this journey, you've witnessed how truth conquers deception and how families can rise from the ashes of betrayal. Have you ever discovered that someone wasn't who they claimed to be? How did you rebuild trust after deception? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like and share it with others who might need to hear that healing is possible after betrayal. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of resilience, redemption, and the families we choose. Thank you for joining Alexandra and her family on this journey from betrayal to triumph. May your own family, whether born or chosen, always be a source of truth, love, and strength. Merry Christmas, and remember, the best response to those who try to break us is to emerge unbreakable.